afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first meeting of the municipal year for the Economic Development, Skills and Culture Policy Committee. Before we begin, I've got a few housekeeping items to cover, after which I'll invite each member of the committee to introduce themselves. As with all of our decision-making meetings, today's meeting is open to the public, and I'm pleased to confirm that there's no items that contain exempt information, so there's no need for the committee to move into a private session during our meeting today. The meeting will be webcast live, and a recording will be available afterwards on the Council's website. This, of course, is a really important part of our commitment to transparency when it comes to decision-making, allowing residents and businesses across our city to follow our proceedings. For the information of committee members and those watching at home, we do not have any petitions, questions or statements from members of the public at today's meeting. Whilst we haven't received any questions or statements today, I'd encourage residents and businesses to take part in our future meetings. Hearing directly from people across the city helps us to make really informed decisions and ensures that our work is informed by the views and experience of Sheffield's residents. As with all council meetings, may I ask that mobile phones and other electronic devices are switched to silent mode so that they don't disturb the conduct of the meeting. And for the avoidance of doubt, there's no fire alarm test that's planned to today. However, if there is a need to evacuate the building, then please do follow the instructions of Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square, which is opposite the Crucible Theatre. I'm now going to ask each policy committee member to introduce themselves in turn before inviting the officers present, who are at a seated position with a microphone in front of them at least, to introduce themselves. I think firstly I'll turn to Councillor Turpin.
Councillor Paul Turpin, Green Party, Gleavers Valley.
It's okay, Councillor Davies, we'll just swap the mics.
There we go. Councillor Turpin has kindly let me use his. Yeah, thanks. It's Andy Lonsdale Davies, Walkley Ward, for the Green Party.
Councillor Laura Moynihan, Councillor for Manor Castle and Deputy Chair of this committee.
Councillor Matt Smith for Park and Harbour Thorn Ward, and I'm Reform Party.
Mohammed Maroof, Group Spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats and Grace Park Ward.
Councillor Rob Rice, Lib Dem Council for East Ecclesfield.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. I'll now ask the officers who are present to introduce themselves. Now, officers will, of course, be on hand to explain the detail behind reports, answer questions, and provide their professional advice as our policy specialists later in the meeting, but will also introduce themselves then. So I'll just turn to Rob, who's to my left.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Robert Parkin, the legal advisor to the committee today.
Good afternoon, I'm Fiona Martinez. I'm the Principal Democratic Services Officer here at Sheffield City Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kate Martin, Executive Director, City Futures.
Thank you very much, Kate, and our other officers who are present and will be talking through papers shortly will introduce themselves when those items come up. So, colleagues, as this is our first meeting of the municipal year, I wanted to say a few words about the year ahead and about how I hope that we can work together as a committee. Now, last year, the Council came together to launch Sheffield's Growth Plan, a 10-year commitment to our residents, businesses and partners, which sets out a shared vision for a thriving, successful and inclusive city. I want to thank colleagues across the Council, including members of this committee and the Strategy and Resources Committee, for their contribution to that work. In particular, it's right to acknowledge the leadership that was shown by Councillor Mohammed Maroof and before him Councillor Martin Smith in helping to shape that agenda. From the conversations that I've had with colleagues across this chamber and in this room, I know that there remains a strong shared commitment to delivering on those ambitions for Sheffield. The growth plan alongside our city goals is far more than an economic strategy. It's also a tool for tackling inequality which continues to exist within our city. Members will know that the gap in life expectancy between the most and least deprived communities in Sheffield remains more than a decade. Where someone lives in our city has a really profound impact on how long they live and too often on how well they live. We cannot separate those health inequalities from the economic inequalities that underpin them. That's why inclusive growth matters, it's why good jobs matter, it's why skills, culture, regeneration and investment matter. The work of this committee has a direct role to play in creating opportunity, improving well-being and ensuring that prosperity is shared across every part of Sheffield. Addressing those inequalities will be a key priority for me as chair this year, supported by Councillor Moynihan as deputy chair, and I hope that every member of this committee will join us in this. Later today, we'll discuss the success of the Pathways to Work programme. That discussion neatly illustrates why the work of this committee is so important. Good work is not just about earning wages, it's a route to better health and greater independence, dignity and stability for individuals and families. Throughout the year ahead, I will want this committee to focus on how we can attract more businesses to Sheffield, create the conditions for them to succeed and grow, support residents to access opportunities, and ensure that the benefits of economic growth are felt in every community across our city. As a school teacher, I'm also passionate about how we can close the gap that emerges so early in young people's lives. Too often, disadvantage that appear in early years are reflected much later in terms of people's educational attainment, in their attendance, in exclusion figures, and if we don't intervene early enough, can ultimately lead to a lifetime of worklessness and reduced opportunity. Alan Milburn's recent report on young people who are not in education, employment or training has rightly focused minds on this challenge. It reminds us that those issues cannot be viewed in isolation. The journey into good employment often begins early in years with the support, opportunities and aspirations that young people are given as they grow up. That's why over the coming year I want this committee to play its part in reducing the number of young people who are not in education, employment or training. Our neat figures remain too high and tackling that challenge will require a concerted effort across education, skills, health and employment services. We must do everything that we can to ensure that every young person in Sheffield has the opportunities to fulfil their potential and build a successful future. That means calling on employers, educators, public services and partners right across our city to work together to create more apprenticeships, more high-quality work experience opportunities and clearer pathways into good work for young people. Turning to culture, in March we received the fantastic news that Sheffield has been longlisted for UK City of Culture. Working with partners across the city, we'll now develop an ambitious bid that reflects Sheffield's status as one of the most exciting cultural cities in our country. Our bid will celebrate the globally influential music, film, arts and gaming and creative industries that Sheffield is known for, but it must also reflect the identity, the diversity, the creativity and pride of communities right across our city. I know that members will hear much more about this work in the coming months ahead, but I hope it's something that we can command the support from across all committee members as we work together to present the strongest possible case for Sheffield. Finally, colleagues, for all of us, this first meeting is under new arrangements which may involve a little bit of a learning curve for all of us, but not least for me. We have some new ways of working in place, and as we all find our feet, both officers and elected members, I'd simply ask that we show patience and kindness to one another. No doubt by the next meeting, we'll have settled into a rhythm and become much familiar with these new arrangements. But in the meantime, I look forward to really working with each and every member of this committee over the year ahead. So colleagues, now on to our agenda. Item 1 of our formal agenda is an opportunity to receive any apologies for absence. And as I understand it, none have been received and we're all present today. Colleagues, item 2 is an opportunity for the committee to consider whether there's a need for any exclusion of the public or press. And as I said at the head of the meeting, there are no items in today's meeting that contain any exempt information and therefore would necessitate that. Item 3 is an opportunity for colleagues to declare any interest. Can I ask, if you do wish to declare an interest, to state the item of business on the particular agenda and state whether it's a pecuniary interest or a pecuniary interest, I think, yeah. Colleagues, anyone wish to make any declaration of interest? I'm not seeing any indication from colleagues who wish to make a declaration of interest. So therefore we'll move on to item 4, which is contained within pages 11 to 15 of your agenda pack. It's the minutes of our previous meeting. I'm mindful that many members here today won't have been on that committee back on the 26th of March 2026, but some people will have been. Can I therefore ask members to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee that were held some time ago now on the 26th of March of this year? Colleagues, are we content with approving those minutes? I'm seeing that colleagues are nodding along and there is no dissent, so therefore those minutes have been passed. That would take us on to item number 5, which is an opportunity to receive any public petitions, questions, statements, and also petitions from members of the public. We've received no public questions, petitions or statements for this particular meeting, but as I said at the start of the meeting, we would strongly encourage members of the public to submit those questions. It's a really important part of our democratic life in this city and helps us in better formulating good policy for our city. That therefore takes us to item 6, which is an opportunity to receive members' questions. I guess as this is our first committee meeting, we've received no members' questions on this particular occasion. Item 7 is an opportunity to receive our first item. This is our work programme, and it is contained within your agenda pack as item number 7. It's very much a live document and one that will evolve over the coming months, and I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Rees. Members will be aware that, subject to discussions at Governance Committee and approval by full Council in September, responsibility for regeneration may well transfer from Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee. That has been the view of many current and former members of this committee, and if approved, will naturally be reflected in our future work programme. As a result, our forward plan is likely to expand somewhat if that does happen in the months ahead. And therefore, in future meetings, I do intend to ask Councillor Moynihan as Deputy Chair to introduce this item and take members through that programme. Whilst I've already outlined some of my priorities for the year ahead, this document also provides the framework with which our work is delivered. As members would expect, the programme will continue to evolve over the course of the year as our priorities emerge, reports are brought forward, and potentially as the remit of this committee expands. Before I ask colleagues to, I think, note, is that correct? I'm asking colleagues to note. To make any comments. I'll just go to Councillor Rees, who I think indicated to speak. Councillor Rees with a very fresh new haircut as well.
Thank you. No, it actually grew back into my head. A few questions on the works programmes, in particular the items which the committee have agreed to add to the agenda but for which no date is set. There are a number of issues that I'd like to raise with that. The first being the major events plan. Phase 1 was approved in October 2024, so it's getting on for 2 years ago, with the work to continue on phase 2. Could we have just a verbal update on the progress of that? And whilst we might not be able to agree a date for it to come back, the fact that it is still talked about in relatively nebulous terms within the works programme and the importance of it doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
Councillor Rees, I think you make a very important point there about the major events plan. It's very important and something that's alluded to in many of our reports, particularly the items later on in the agenda where we talk about the performance of this committee, and it does spotlight a number of those big, important strategic events that happen in our city. I think, as we said in the preamble to this particular item, this work programme is something that will evolve over time, And under our new governance model, as I understand it, these sorts of discussions are the sorts of things that we would flesh out in much more detail at our policy development and forward planning meetings. So what I will do is certainly raise that at our policy development and forward planning meetings. I'll just go to Councillor Moynihan.
Yes, I think we've got to be mindful this is a very broad, this committee has a big portfolio. There are many items in it and we're going to have to prioritise which ones we deal with when, but I think that is certainly one because of the planning, the resources, etc. does come back to this committee sooner rather than later, and Ben and I will pick this up with Justin and get a timetable for it.
I'll just go back to Councillor Rees if he wants to make a final point there.
So yeah, on the major events plan, I would be expecting a date to be attributed to this item on the work programme by the next meeting of this committee, given its importance. I would also like an update to the LGBTQ plus quarter. We requested an update October last year, but yet there isn't any sort of movement in the dates on the work programme. This is pertinent because we have had a very successful issue of Kelham Pride. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there myself, but I'm assured by friends and colleagues that a good time was had by all. But this is particularly pertinent because on the advertising for Kelham Pride, there were the logos for both Sheffield University, but unless I'm mistaken, no representation from Sheffield City Council. So those two things, the lack of date on the work programme for the LGBTQ plus quarter and the lack of representation is concerning.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. As he may well be aware, as the Liberal Democrats did run this committee previously, and I've only been in post for a few weeks, Sheffield Pride, or Kelham Pride, it does fulfil that Sheffield Pride role, doesn't it? It's an event for the whole of our city, is financially supported by Sheffield City Council to the tune of about £6,000 per year. This organisation does support Sheffield Pride. I certainly made a statement on social media over the past few days to say that it would certainly be my group's preference, and it'll be what I'll be strongly arguing for at this committee, that we increase that contribution from £6,000 and actually we give it a multi-year settlement because it's really important to celebrate the success of Kelham Pride. It brings a huge number of people into our city, but also it provides a space to demonstrate diversity in our city in all of its centres, and that Sheffield is a welcoming space for each and every one of us. I think the points that he's made are very pertinent. I think in line with our new governance arrangements, I will seek to note those comments that have been made and bring them forward towards our policy development and forward planning meetings that we'll be having over the next few weeks. So thank you very much, Councillor Rees.
Matt, are you talking about this work programme? So no, my next point will be on another item on the work programme, so if you're wanting to contribute.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. On this point, I noticed this year that obviously the Kelham Pride event was at the same time as Armed Forces Day up at the top of Fargate, and mentioning funding just while we're here, I just wondered how much the council had given to the Armed Forces Day events that were going on at the same time. Thank you.
I'm not sure that that's necessarily a question for the work plan discussion, but I think it's probably pertinent to answer that particular question. The City Council does support in kind the Armed Forces Day celebration. It's very important to do that, and we have done for a number of years. Now, quite clearly, on some occasions, those two events fall on the same day. I also would question the point that I think Councillor Smith has just said there. We know that there are many thousands of veterans in our armed forces who are also LGBT and proudly serve our country, and many of which have fallen in the line of duty. And it's therefore very important that we acknowledge both Pride as well as Armed Forces Day. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. I'll just go to Councillor Moynihan.
I think, Councillor Smith, you might want to take that up with Councillor Fox, Denise Fox, who's been involved with she's our Armed Forces champion and has been involved over a number of years and puts considerable time and effort and has built up excellent links with the British Legion and other agencies.
Absolutely.
It's our work programme.
Now, I will take another point, Councillor Smith, but is it in relation to the work programme? So these are points that you wish to make now, which then can be taken forward at the policy development and forward planning meetings.
It's just a point on passing comment on what was being discussed, and I think it is a valid question to just ask the question, but since I've not been given an answer as to the actual funding, then I'll take that as perhaps we don't know on this committee.
No, Councillor Smith, I think you've raised an item within a discussion about our forward plan. Now, quite clearly, we don't have the wider information available to us. What I have said to you is that the City Council remains committed to supporting our armed forces in our city, and we do provide supports to that particular event in our city. So, with regards to all of the points that have been made, in particular Councillor Rees's point, we'll make sure that they're taken forward at the policy development and forward planning meeting. I'll just take one additional point, Councillor Rees.
So my final question on the work programme is relating to the item Ignite the Night. This was generated on the work programme via a motion proposed by myself in September 2025. The work that I, myself and Councillor Maroof have put forward into this includes meetings with the Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association and also the now created Sheffield Independent Venues Association. The fact that it remains as an unknown date to be brought onto the work programme given the length of time that it has been on there, but also the news that the Green Room on Division Street has closed due to increasing costs, and the Curzon Cinema has closed due to similar reasons, and the fact that it has often been cited that the increases in expenses introduced by, well, I was going to say the new Labour government, the last Labour government, given what's happening down in Westminster, has not contributed to a useful or productive environment. So I was just wondering, given that you are now chair of this committee, when will you expect this to be on the work programme?
Thank you, Councillor Rees, and it's good that Councillor Maroof is speaking after you. Of course, Councillor Maroof, and I was very kind in my introductory remarks to him at the start of our meeting, has been in charge of this committee for some time. If on our work programme that particular item does not have a date, that's a legacy from the previous chairship and is something that you might want to bring up with your colleague in the Liberal Democrats. Of course, we'll bring forward all the points that you've made to our policy development and forward planning meetings, and that may well be reflected in our work programme going forward. Councillor Moynihan.
Councillor Miskell and I have extensive link to the Sheffield Independent Venues Association, and they're going to be inviting us to meet with them at their regular meetings, and we'll be delighted to attend.
And I think I'd also say, Councillor Rees, I'm more than happy. I sent you an email to organise a cup of tea for us to meet together to discuss this or any other item. Councillor Maroof.
Chair, just following on from that, I don't want to labour the point any more than it needs to be, but one of the issues around the nighttime economy was that it was a very strong economy for the city, and that's why I in my one-year term, so I'd like to clarify that I only had 1 year, we did reach out to these people that were involved with the nighttime economy, including the gentleman that you mentioned from London as well. We have a wonderful nighttime economy in the city, and the motion that we put forward, or Rob put forward a year or so ago, around having a nighttime economy board was something that I was working on, had discussions with Kate and various other people to move this matter forward. And I think it's terribly important that we do move this matter forward, because not only does it create a good business environment in the evenings, it's got knock-on effects to ancillary industries as well, and does create quite a lot of employment. And some of the stuff that I've actually seen that people have done in other parts of the country has been absolutely brilliant. So I think that's something that we need to bring. So the point I'm actually making is it was something that was very high on my agenda, and obviously you're now the chair, and I would ask that it remains high on the agenda, because that is what people out there are asking for us to do.
I'd agree with him, and for those very reasons, I've scheduled a meeting with the Nighttime Industries Association to discuss those matters. Of course, I'm more than happy to meet with Councillor Maroof, but also Councillor Rees on this and any other matter. In fact, I think I've sent you an email, and we're seeking to schedule a meeting in, and hopefully we can discuss that and any other matters. Councillor Maroof?
Apologies, Chair. I forgot the second part of it because I got so carried away with the first part there. The second part of it is around marketing of Sheffield, which I think when I took office last year was something that we were actually working on. Basically, the brochure for Sheffield, that we can go out and sell Sheffield on. And I know our officers have been working on this, and there has been a date that's been mooted around that this will happen, and then we will launch Sheffield to the world. Again, that is another item that I think we desperately need. And I hear now that the suggestion that I put forward quite some time ago, that regeneration should be part of this as well, may be something that might be coming to fruition in the future, which makes it even more the reason that we should have that brochure. And talking from a purely property sort of background here, it is something that the people out there, developers in particular, businesses, have been asking for, and it's something that we as a City Council genuinely do need to lead on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and he'll be aware of the Sheffield Inspires branding that we now have and take around the country and indeed internationally to sell our city. More recently, we took that to UK Reef and were able to speak with many different developers and partners right across the country and internationally, and we'll continue to do so. I'll go to Councillor Moynihan, but I am mindful that we've got other business today. Councillor Moynihan? Briefly,
I'm a big fan of the nighttime economy, mostly vicariously these days, but I do endorse what you say. I've just come from the UK Property and Construction Met conference at the Royal Victoria Hotel, where many developers were there, architects, etc., contractors. They were very, very complimentary about Sheffield, and I stressed that it is about a new neighbourhoods prospectus. It's not just about the city centre. It's ensuring that there's positive growth in all our neighbourhoods. But it was really, really inspiring to talk to them and hear their positive views of Sheffield and Sheffield City Council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moynihan, for representing us within the construction industry this morning. I will just go for one final point from Councillor Smith, but I just carefully ask him to reflect certainly only on the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. I just did want to pass a comment of support about the idea of a board for a nighttime economy, because I'd like to say that since being elected in May, the amount of venues that have contacted me specifically with issues across the board that need just our support has been quite overwhelming. And I'd like to also celebrate the recent approval of the 3 Tons pub being open till 2:30 in the morning. I think that live music venues and things should be encouraged and supported to be kind of as productive and lively as possible in a city. And I think when you move to a city, you've got to appreciate the fact that there may be some noise and some hustle and bustle which goes along with it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll just finally go to Councillor Moynihan, but we must close this particular item when it comes to our work programme.
Very briefly, I don't know if Councillor Smith's aware, but the Labour MP for Sheffield Central has done a lot of work with the visitor economy, hospitality, etc. She's met extensively with businesses, and she's reflecting that back into government to ensure that they listen to what's coming from the hospitality sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So that was the item where we were discussing the work programme. Now, if you have a little look at your agenda pack, the work programme is simply an item where we're asked to note the contents. And of course, any item that has been raised or any particular point that has been raised will be taken forward in our policy development and forward planning meetings. Colleagues, are we content with noting the work programme? I can see that colleagues are content with noting that, and I can see that there's no dissent, so therefore we've noted it. Thank you very much, colleagues. That therefore takes us on to item number 8, which is the Pathways to Work 2025-26 item. It's on page number 23 to 54 of your agenda pack. Now, colleagues, I'm pleased to bring this report to committee today. In a second, I think Laura and Kevin will provide a brief technical overview of the report, and members will have an opportunity to ask any particular questions. But before they do, I want to say a few words by way of introduction, particularly for those committee members who, like me, were not serving on this committee during the last municipal year. We've heard a great deal in recent days about the opportunities that devolution can bring and how this might be harnessed by the new Prime Minister when he comes into office. And we all know, of course, that that most likely candidate has also been Metro Mayor for Greater Manchester. For me, Pathways to Work is a really excellent example of what can be achieved when services are designed around communities and where local organisations are trusted to help deliver solutions to local challenges. Put simply, this programme is about helping people into work. Now that matters because good work provides people with dignity, independence and opportunity. It also has that direct role to play in tackling economic inequalities that continue to exist within our city, as members will know, can have a profound impact on people's lives, something which I see in my own ward in Park and Arborthorne. Colleagues will see from the report that there's very much to celebrate after the first year of the Pathfinder project, which is surpassing others in South Yorkshire in terms of effectiveness and leading nationally. In 2025-26, there were an 18.8% increase in the number of disadvantaged residents engaging with employment support services compared to previous years. The programme's also supported 815 residents into employment. Now that's 815 Sheffield residents whose lives have been changed for the better through access to work and opportunities that come with it. And it represents a 62% increase on the previous year. Now that's a significant achievement for this organisation, this city and our partners to celebrate. It's also right that we recognise the contribution of voluntary community and faith sector organisations that have helped make these outcomes possible. Their local knowledge, trusted relationship and deep roots within community are a real vital part of the programme's success. Now, in my own ward, I've seen the excellent work from organisations including Healy City Farm and Manor Castle Development Trust. And I'm sure that members across our committee today will be able to have examples from their own ward of local organisations that are making a real difference to residents' lives, which they might be able to share. Members can find that full list of providers right at the end of the report in Appendix 1 of the report. But before I hand over to Laura and Kevin for some of the technical detail, I also want to highlight the programme's work with young people who aren't in education, employment or training. Now, earlier in this meeting, I spoke about the importance of tackling Sheffield's neat figures and ensuring that young people have those clear pathways into employment. That's one reason why this aspect of the programme is so important and will be a key part of our work throughout this year. Through the Pathways to Work and wider opportunity Sheffield offer, 462 young people secured jobs, which wouldn't have done otherwise without this particular programme. Now, whilst undoubtedly there's much more work to be doing, it's a significant achievement and one that we should recognise and celebrate. With that, colleagues, I'll now hand over to Laura and Kevin to introduce the report in more detail. Before members move then on to questions, I should also note that for those watching at the meeting, the committee members were provided with an opportunity to ask questions of clarification in advance of today's meeting in a session that was organised, I think, last week. And I hope members found that process helpful and useful in supporting today's discussion and the contributions today that can hopefully build upon that. Laura and Kevin, supported by Justin, I'll hand over to you.
Should we very briefly introduce ourselves to the committee members first? So I'm Justin Homer. I'm Director of Economic Development, Skills and Culture here at City Council.
Hi, I'm Laura Hayfield. I'm Head of Employment, Skills and Economy at Sheffield City Council.
And
Sorry, Kevin Owers. I'm an Economic Policy Officer in the Employment, Skills and Economy Service.
As Councillor Miskell said, the paper reflects on the Pathways to Work programme performance over the last year and looks forward to the current year of activity. The paper starts by reflecting on the improvements made to the system for employment, skills and wellbeing over the past year in Sheffield and South Yorkshire. Before this programme, the city was filled with a myriad of employment projects with different names, funded by different government departments, and often making an element of competition between them, which was extremely difficult even for professionals to navigate, never mind the residents and employers that are seeking to benefit from them. The system improvements that have been made through devolution to draw most employment funding to the city via the South Yorkshire mayoral combined authorities and down to local authorities in their unique position to understand their communities and deliver place-based services in a streamlined way. Sheffield City Council has a long-standing relationship with the voluntary and community sector who are able to attract and support people who would otherwise not engage with the system. And in addition to these many open doors in the city, a triage system has been developed to help people navigate them to the support that is most appropriate for their needs. The report then reflects upon how the individual projects comprised within Pathways to Work have enabled the augmentation of employment support in the city, and some of those outputs and outcomes have been described by Councillor Miskell. The report then goes on to propose some of the activity for this coming year that we're already started following the extension of the funding for the programmes. This includes targeting of areas that still remained underserviced within Sheffield, an initiative targeting those young people who are most at risk of becoming not in education, employment or training through partnerships with the further education providers, a volunteer to career programme which recognises the value of volunteering as a stepping stone into employment, amongst others referenced in the paper. I'm always encouraged to try and bring these programmes to life, so we're going to show a video of one of the participants of the Pathways to Work initiative and the support that they've received through the voluntary and community sector.
Before the pandemic, I was a full-time mum. I left school with no qualifications. I was pretty much illiterate. And then I decided I wanted to go into adult education. I developed agoraphobia without even knowing that it was an issue. To go for my very first COVID jab, I went to a doctor's surgery, I had the jab, and all of a sudden my heart started beating out of my chest. I was dizzy, I felt sick, nauseous, and it turned out it was just a huge panic attack. After that, I got home and it was another 6 months before I actually left my house. So I became really reclusive and didn't go anywhere, didn't speak to people. I didn't even want to speak to my own family.
Manor and Castle is a charity organisation who helps people get back into work. It's just supporting them with education, training, looking for opportunities to get into work. You can't rush people getting to work if they're not actually ready to work. It's about working with them to help them grow. It's putting things in place that she's happy with and about the goals for her reaching it, giving the support she wanted on her volunteering, making sure she had somebody there.
I started off volunteering, then I upped it to a full day a week, and I got to know everybody that works here. I got to know the work that they do as well. The volunteering opened my eyes a lot, and I got really comfortable with the routine as well, just going out one day a week and making sure I'm here on time.
She has grown in her role, Rachel. She's achieved so much, and knowing just you've been a part of that is what makes my job worthwhile. From somebody what didn't go out, she didn't like being around people, and now she's in a part-time role. That is a big achievement.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for sharing Rachel's story. That was certainly very empowering, and it was good to hear the great work done by one of our partner organisations, Manor Castle Development Trust, who I know does some sterling work in my ward, but also in other parts of the city as well. Laura, Kevin or Justin, is there anything further that you'd like to add? No. With that in mind, I'll therefore go to members of the committee. This is an opportunity to ask any points of clarification, bearing in mind that we did have an opportunity last week as well, and to also make any particular points. Now, I did see Councillor Rees indicate, so I'll go to him, then I'll go to Councillor Turpin, and then I'll go to Councillor Maroof. Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Councillor Miskell. I'd first like to apologise for my apologies to the pre-meeting. Unfortunately, I had other commitments at work, so I wasn't able to attend. All very good. Good work and kind of a broad-ranging kind of areas of interaction. I am very conscious of, given on the final pages, the tables of the schemes that are schemes that have been funded as part of it. I've just got a few questions, because one of the themes last year that I raised across a number of areas, and in particular training, apprenticeships for young people, and I think in given the report that Alan Milburn around NEETs has come out, that we need to have a particular interest in communities like mine up in the north of the city. So I represent East Ecclesfield. We've got the north end of Parson Cross. My neighbouring ward in West Ecclesfield has got High Green, and I work in Stocksbridge, which has got a high level of unemployment, but also white working class boys who feel detached from opportunity, who don't see kind of a future in their local area. And my questions are going to be around the provision available to them, because I've spotted a few issues. So the only provision that I've been able to see in that table that covers the north areas, that Stocksbridge, Grenoside, Ecclesfield North, High Green, Burncross, Deepcar, Bolsterston and Chapeltown, is the Stocksbridge Town Enterprise Partnership, and they received one, I assume, full-time equivalent key worker, whereas other areas, including Zest and Saw, received 3. Is this due to, is this full-time equivalent kind of calculation on population, on calculated need, or is there something else that kind of explains this difference in provision?
It's a very good question, Councillor Rees, and no doubt Laura and colleagues will be able to reflect on it. And I would imagine that a lot of it is about the capacity and availability of voluntary sector partners in different parts of the city, which unfortunately isn't evenly spread, but we'd like it to be. Laura, let me just get reflection from Laura, who might be able to give us a technical answer to that one.
Yes, so the geographic contracts were awarded initially at the beginning of last year based upon the volume of economically inactive people who were in those areas in terms of the Trailblazer. But Councillor Miskell is also correct that we have some issues with availability of voluntary and community sector organisations. So Stocksbridge has been an issue in terms of that for a number of years. We actually sought out Stocksbridge Enterprise Partnership and positively engaged with them to work with them on growing their capacity within that area. That has now increased this year, where we've been able to apply for some gain share funding as well to look specifically at that area, because it is an area with some concern and not enough provision. It is underserviced. So we'll be looking to try and produce a employment, skills, enterprise and wellbeing plan for specifically that area. But Kevin, I don't know if you want to come in with some more figures.
Just one additional point. So the area listings, that was for the purposes of issuing tenders to ensure that we could increase coverage. What had happened more than we may have liked in the past is that when we would procure activity, just because of the distribution of the voluntary and community sector organisations that were experienced in the employment support field, it did tend to result in clusters of provision, so that we found that we would be potentially overrepresented in some areas of the city, and there were more notable gaps. Now, there are still gaps. That's just the nature of having a large core city. But what we do have as well is some of these, the geographic providers deliver outreach services in areas that aren't necessarily listed as part of their commissioning zones. So we specified MSOA areas on the basis that we wanted to have at least one project that was anchored within that area. But that doesn't mean that there aren't additional services. So, for instance, an example in the North East, Saul, one of our partners that delivers a North East contract, they deliver outreach beyond the area into some of the neighbourhoods that you described. And so there is additional touch points to maximise the number of open doors that we have into the Pathways to Work programme.
Thank you. Councillor Rees?
Yeah, I've got two more and I will group them just for ease of time. You mentioned a tendering process. Was that a open tendering process, or was there any guidance in there if there was provision in an area that was, or if someone came forward as part of the tendering process and once you'd finalised it, you realised that an area was underserved? Was there any attempt to go out to organisations that may have capacity but not have the skills or requirements needed? And I'm thinking about places like High Green, somewhere which has got quite a high level of deprivation and does have employment support services within it. I'm surprised to not see organisations in that area. So my first question was, if there were underserved areas, did you go and try and engage partners? And secondly, did you have any consideration in the tendering process as to the public transport limitations in parts of the city? I ask this because getting between High Green and Stocksbridge is a bit of a, I'm not going to say the words, because living in one area and working in the other, I know how difficult it can be. if someone is on low incomes or may not have transport of their own, you're effectively cutting that person off from accessing this training. So firstly, did you engage any partners? And secondly, was there any consideration for public transport provision in the awarding of these contracts?
Yes, so quickly in answer to the first question, yes, so each year we've had 2 tendering rounds where we go out initially on a geographic basis. The Stocksbridge partnership is one that came out of that, where we went out for that area in an open tender. We didn't get satisfactory responses, so we went and engaged with Stocksbridge Town Enterprise Partnership and worked with them to award a capacity building bid in the first year we worked with them, and now they continue to deliver the programme. So yeah, we absolutely do. In terms of accessibility, transport-wise, it is quite difficult in areas of the city. We do try and look at the areas of the city based on where people can travel to, but that's not necessarily always the nearest place to them as the crow flies, as it were. There's some consideration, but as Kevin said before, there's certainly not adequate capacity across the whole of the city, partly because of transport reasons and partly because we could always do with more funding to be able to support.
Yeah, and I guess on that point, obviously helpfully drawing attention to the geographically targeted programmes. There were other non-geographically targeted programmes that obviously were available to individuals in those areas, which were sort of were less specifically limited to the geography. But you're absolutely right in terms of the lessons around connectivity, and that's why we're bringing this information to the committee today. And says we've got 1 year's worth of experience with this programme. Sadly, at the moment, there's only 1 more year of confirmed funding for Pathways to Work. So obviously we're learning the lessons for the second year. We're still waiting to hear exactly what's going to happen beyond the current financial year. And there's lots of opportunities that's coming forward through different pots, whether that's combined authority related pots or whether that's Department for Work and Pensions. And as we go into the next round, because this is the nature of this funding, for a number of years it was European structural funds, it was then LEP funds, it was then the first round of UK shared prosperity funds, and now it's local growth funds. It sort of reinvents itself as a pot, and Laura and the team have to kind of constantly respond to that. And sometimes that reinvention sort of allows us to play more into accessibility factors than perhaps others. You know, for example, last year was a really strong story about the economic exclusion, employment, the EIT.
Economic inactivity
trailblazer. Whereas, so that was a really strong focus of it, rather than say in work. But governments previously would have been really focused on more in work progression. So obviously we're kind of responding to that national picture to a certain extent. But I think that's a really fair point, and I think as we design these things going forward, we can play that more in. And obviously there's opportunities now through franchising and working closely with the combined authority, how we can actually have more direct influence in the routes to get those people from the communities where they live into the places where the job opportunities are. So that's something we need to work really closely with the combined authority on.
Well, I'm going to give a...
Apologies, that wasn't working. I think just as Deputy Chair, Councillor Moynihan just wanted to come in on that point. Councillor Moynihan?
Yeah, as someone who used to run Zest in Upperthorpe and Netherthorpe and was key in shaping the European structural funds and how it was targeted at worklessness, I'll use broader sense worklessness, unfortunately lost European Social Fund when we voted to leave the EU. So it left a very big gap in our funding, and we're trying to deal with that through SIMCA and national government. But I do have to say that VAS, that network of community organisations, still exists. Even those who haven't got the contracts are currently facilitated by Voluntary Action Sheffield. And I also know, because I keep in touch with what's happening via meeting Helen Sims from VAS regularly, that not all community organisations want to deliver this programme. They don't think it fits their profile their skills, their understanding, because we're talking about quality delivery here. You have to go through matrix and other standards to be able to deliver the programmes. Not all organisations have got the capacity to do that. VAS are working with them to try to ensure they gain that capacity, but it would not be fair on them to expect them to deliver something that they haven't got the capacity, they haven't got the skills, and they haven't got the technical standards. So I just want to make that absolutely clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moynihan. Councillor Rees?
I just wanted to make a final comment. I do know of organisations in the Ecclesfield Parish Council area, and I'm happy to have conversations with them on your behalf, because I think the Ecclesfield Parish Council area and the wider North Sheffield area is underserved. It has a particular and growing issue with employment, especially around NEETs. So I'm happy to have those conversations for you, because it's something I would like to see change going forward.
And thank you, Councillor Rees. Would certainly take you up on that very kind offer as a local councillor to put community organisations in touch with our council officers. So thank you very much. My next contribution is Councillor Turpin. Councillor Turpin.
Thanks. It's a shame we discussed the work plan for so long, so I've got to leave in a minute to pick my boy up from school. And this is a really good initiative, and I like it. And I think it's also worth pointing out that, as I like to whenever the UK Shared Prosperity Fund comes up, that had we remained in the EU, South Yorkshire would be receiving in the region of £100 million a year more than we are. So that's a shame, isn't it? So I noticed from the numbers that the success of the initiative is really accelerating as time passes, and it made me wonder what the ceiling of success is for something like this. It's concerning when you say that the future funding isn't guaranteed. So I wonder how far you think this can go, and what learning there is about the initiative in order to keep that service for Sheffielders.
A couple of things on that. So this very much started at the beginning of 25-26, this initiative, and actually the contracts were awarded later than that. So the officers within the local authority allowed the project to go ahead at risk in order to try and maximise the outcomes that were achieved for the residents. However, just because contracts were awarded on the 1st of April does not mean that the capacity had been built within the voluntary and community sector, which, as I said in my introduction, it was a big augmentation of the support that had previously been available. So I would say that that support was probably at sort of full strength from about September last year. You'll note in the papers that on the economic and activity trailblazer, whilst Sheffield has gained the most employment outcomes in South Yorkshire of the local authorities, and is the best performing economic and activity trailblazer in the country, it didn't quite hit the target of 800 economically inactive people into work. But with the capacity that has now been built, we're very much hoping to achieve that. I think it's notable as well that we really do need to focus on our young people who are not in education, employment and training, which is why that's been picked out in the paper, and has actually been quite pleasantly surprised really by the amount of young people who have voted with their feet to go and receive services in their communities, and have you know, a reasonable proportion of them have gone into work in line with the rest of the project. And obviously all those people that started on that project, some of them have you know, need longer to get into employment than, you know, if they joined towards the end of or even the middle of last year. So we absolutely hope to achieve those targets in the second year, and then we've shown that, I suppose, the additional scale in terms of money, we can, you know, better achieve outcomes. The more money is put forward and the more we streamline the services. So what I'm saying is that, you know, we wouldn't need double the amount of finances to double the amount of jobs, but, you know, it's not suggesting that there is either the amount of provision in the city as is needed when you look at, you know, the rates of worklessness, particularly in certain parts of the city, and certainly in amongst some groups, such as young people with special educational needs, and other significant barriers.
Thank you very much, and unfortunately Councillor Turpin has had to leave the meeting in order to go and pick up his little one, and we'll try and work with him to see whether our meeting times can be adjusted slightly to help him out if we're able to do so. And thanks also for the record for Councillor Turpin for making that very constructive contribution about how Brexit or leaving the European Union has been an economic disaster for our region. I'd certainly agree with him. And Councillor Smith. You were on next on my agenda, or perhaps Councillor Maroof, apologies. No, Councillor Maroof, go on.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Chair. I mean, firstly, I'd like to thank you for the report because I was part of it last year and recognise lots of what you've just said there. But there is a point to make here as well, which is that the excellent work that you actually do with very limited resources needs to be highlighted in public, to be honest, because we get a lot of criticism around this subject, but the resources that the officers are actually working with are fairly limited, and the people that you're working with and reaching out to are sometimes fairly difficult to get to as well. So I'd like to thank you for that. And secondly, I'm quite pleased you continue with something that I started last year, which was bringing real-life stories. I think that makes a big difference to the public to see what's actually happened, rather than the statistical reports that we love, but I think the public probably switch off on. And thirdly, I do apologise for not being at the pre-meeting, but sometimes I feel that some of the questions we do ask at the pre-meeting need to be asked in public as well, because the public out there don't want us to come here and have cleared all the reports beforehand, because they want us to hear, they want to hear from us that we're actually speaking their language in terms of what their problems are. So I don't make any apologies for asking questions again, Chair. So with a good heart there. So take it in good spirit. So that's around the questions. One of the key areas that I think we do have problems with, and there is a question amongst the observations here as well. Next time there won't be that many observations because you'd have been in place for about 2 months then. I only had a year. So it was.
The government haven't sold everything.
So anyway, coming back to the more important points, isn't it? We're not worried about whether we've had time or not. I think the important point is we deliver on these things. And I think what I've found from going around places, and this is the question, is what do we need to do next? Which is, a lot of the people come onto these courses, and my colleague, Councillor Rice, has commented on East Ecclesfield and Parson Cross, where there are very difficult communities there. And I think we recognise the fact that white British boys there was still a struggle to get them into employment and into pathways into employment. The real question for us arises, and I think it was from going to one of the places that Richard Smith took me around, was there are genuinely decent, well-mannered, sorry, wrong word there, well-intentioned, that's what I meant, people who want jobs, young people who want jobs. They said that to me. But the fact is, once they've done these courses, there aren't any jobs out there for them to get into. So I think that is a huge challenge. And the question from me to yourselves is, and I probably know the answer anyway, but I think it needs to be rehearsed in public, is what can we do to make it the next step? And the Chair's also commented on this in the forward that he did earlier on, is how can we make those proper jobs, if you see what I'm getting at. It's okay having the training, it's okay getting all the tools in the toolbox, but not getting a job, it's going to disillusion you again. So I think that is the stage that we need to be trying to move forward on. Real jobs after this. Thank you, Chair.
Just a couple of technical responses to that. So the paper does mention that Year 1 very much focused on the personalised support nature of the programme, and Year 2 is very much focusing on employer activation. There's a number of employers that we're now working with on who have sort of more bulk vacancies, and that there's been some tailored support provided to those employers. Examples are Sheffield teaching hospitals, We're currently working potentially with a bus company that I won't mention yet, and a number. Mr. Whippy's another where we've got a number of sort of bulk vacancies that we can tailor specific programmes to. But it is an issue, particularly the amount of entry-level apprenticeship vacancies that exist within the city. The wage subsidy has been made available in this year too, across the city, across South Yorkshire, and Sheffield is having quite a high uptake and expects to use up all of those opportunities. But absolutely, more needs to be done to work with businesses to generate more employment opportunities. The small team within the City Council are there to do just that. So it's very difficult for an individual voluntary and community sector organisation to be able to go and offer an employment solution to a bigger employer like that, or particularly if they're focused on a certain cohort that may have a specific barrier. The sense of having those people within the local authorities that they can go out and work with those larger employers usually to spread those vacancies out across the city and help with the recruitment and pre-employment training for those.
And thank you very much, Laura. Councillor Smith, my apologies. I messed up earlier and got the order wrong. I think it's you and then Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I wanted to address the Brexit is still coming up. I feel just as frustrated as you all do that the opportunities haven't quite been taken advantage of yet, but I'm sure they will do in the future. Once we get a government that finally actually agrees and believes in it in the first place, which we haven't yet since 2016, which is a shame. I think in terms of economic catastrophe, I think the increase to employers' national insurance contributions is a huge hit on the region, and that cannot help. It's definitely had a direct impact on the huge and outrageous NEET figures which we've seen over recent months, which is really not very good at all for especially for young people, because they've lost their jobs because they're too expensive to employ thanks to this Labour government, or the last one, as you said earlier. And then things like the Clean Air Zone, you know, the cost of employing, the cost of getting things into the city, the productivity is now more expensive than ever. So no surprise that young people are finding it hard to get and maintain work. I'd also like to pass on my apologies for missing the pre-meet. I was over in Rotherham at the Better Together conference, focusing on helping young people, young talent thrive at work. Just seeing the amazing work that companies like Affinity are doing with care experience young people, even as big as Next PLC and other local organisations like the Workwise Foundation, and over at the new Skill Street complex, and big events like Get Up to Speed, things that I've also been involved with in the past, which is we should be celebrating in this chamber and in this building, but that the council hasn't been all that involved with in the past. I'd like to ask if whether within the framework of this, the Pathways to Work, whether there is potential kind of drawing on the mention of public transport and the links. I mean, one of the biggest sources of opportunity and jobs in the whole of the country is the manufacturing park, just on the way to Rotherham. But if you look at buses, there's a bus every hour, and it can take an hour to get there. I know myself, probably around 50 people I've come across who can't get to that site. And it was mentioned at a Simca meeting that there's 5,000 or so case studies of people who have declined work on that site because they can't get there. So it might be easy for, we might, myself and Councillor Miskell, maybe from a well-connected ward where the trams go straight into town, but if your job is over in the manufacturing park and there's no direct link, then that's a huge barrier. So I think with that, I know that's more of a cross-committee thing, with if we could try and link up the transport and with Simca as well, that could always be a good idea. And I also had a meeting with the director of Harrison College over in Doncaster about trying to make the curriculum actually feed into 21st century jobs, because there's this huge disconnect now from this ageing curriculum where young children are being taught the same thing every year, the jobs have moved on now. We're talking about different jobs now than the curriculum is even than were around when the curriculum was made a decade ago. So I know that's not as such an issue that comes under this committee as well, but if we can be advising or trying to get Simca to, instead of spend 30 million on Shellsmore roundabout or whatever, to put it into some improvement in transport where the jobs are, and also instead of digging up all the pavements along Attercliffe and Darnell and putting them towards the jobs as well, I think a lot of people would be extremely grateful. That's some food for
Thank you
thought.
very much, Councillor Smith, and also thank you very much for the company that you work for, Arup, for the support that they give when it comes to various different transport schemes right across our city. I think you've mentioned a number of schemes that we're pushing forward on across our city. I'll just ask Laura for any reflections that she might well have.
Not particularly, other than to say that we do, as part of the programme, provide travel costs to anybody as they want to travel to our provision, travel to jobs fairs, go to their first month of work until, their wages they get and find themselves on their feet. But, I have limited ability to affect the actual bus routes.
But on that point, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm one of the people who does regularly get the bus to the MRC because I don't drive in the daytime, and they're about once every 20 minutes now, though hugely better than they were. But they don't always work for the shift patterns for the businesses that are there. That's the key thing. So I think that we are already working with people like McLaren, had conversations with them and linking them into the bus franchising plans that the Combined Authority is taking forward. And clearly, within the long-term, medium-term plans for the Combined Authority is the new train station at Waverley as well, which obviously is technically a Rotherham scheme, but actually if you speak to McLaren, UK Atomic Energy Agency, the businesses that they associate themselves as Sheffield businesses effectively, because that's the nearest big city. So I think, again, that could be a real game changer in terms of, and then the future opportunities for tram-train. So we think the partnership we've got with the Combined Authority is really important. Bus franchising just provides us the tool that we haven't really had for decades, really, to try and align. It won't necessarily be perfect, but at least there are some sensible conversations we could have going forward to us, so it's really important.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, on Councillor Smith's point about the curriculum, personally, I remember learning very little in school that actually directly fed into any kind of job I've ever done. I think further education and higher education are far more useful for that. But I think it's a very valuable point that we should be making sure the curriculum is actually teaching people things they will need to know in later life. Obviously, things like numeracy and literacy are incredibly important. We're understanding the history of the world and the country and things like that, so that we don't possibly repeat mistakes that have been made in the past. But I think, there's a lot of work to be done on shaping the national curriculum to make sure it's actually useful for a lot of our kids. But initially, the point I wanted to make, or the question I wanted to put, was that I think we're all very clearly, unsurprisingly, in agreement on how important community organisations and action groups are, especially in a time of continued austerity and underfunding of local government. And these are kind of having to pick up pieces of that, and it's the third sector now that does a lot of the kind of heavy lifting in these things. So is there any kind of policies that have been looked at about making sure that a lot of these people who have experienced unemployment, being neets themselves, economically inactive, whatever their situation might have been, possibly experiencing homelessness, about making sure that they actually contribute in the future to this kind of voluntary work themselves with their lived experiences?
So just a couple of things on that. So going back to the curriculum and the relevant education, just to mention that, as I know some of the councillors are new to the committee, that we have the Sheffield Employment and Skills Advisory Board. It's really important with the limited funding that we have in the city that we very much work in partnership. So the organisations that sit, or some of them are DWP, the Chamber, the two universities, Public Health, the Integrated Care Board, and it's chaired by Angela Fowkes, who's the principal of Sheffield College. And they're doing an awful lot of work to try and increase both vocational and technical education within the city. Having said that, for a city of our size, we don't have the volume of technical education that we should have, and certainly the allocation of T-level placements to Sheffield College is lower than it should be for a college of that size. Just moving on in terms of people with experience and working for the voluntary and community sector, I mean, absolutely, sort of the whole ethos of the way that we work, which is very, very much more than in other places in the country, in Sheffield is with the voluntary and community sector for quite that reason, that often the people who will work there live in those communities, reflect those communities, understand those communities the best. I mentioned in my preamble about the Volunteer to Career initiative, which is recognising volunteering, so very much is looking at the people who are on caseloads, who are experiencing worklessness, and offering volunteering opportunities for them amongst the different voluntary and community sector partners that we work with, where they will go and work in, have periods of time in separate organisations in order to build up their experience, with the idea that eventually they will move into paid employment. There's also a very specific initiative that we're just launching at the moment, being supported by the Institute of Employability Professionals, where we're working with individuals who would like to work in the employability sector but aren't, need those skills and experience, because as Councillor Moynihan said earlier, it is a profession and it is a difficult and it needs qualifications and experience to offer it, but the scheme will offer up these traineeship opportunities within the employability sector, and that's really to grow some of that support from people who, as I say, have lived experience.
Thank you. Any other colleague wish to make a contribution or ask a question? Councillor Moynihan.
It's comment really. I mean, just to reassure people, Councillor Miscall and I have met with Justin and his team and have stressed that one of our priorities is to tackle worklessness, and particularly around NEETs. I welcome the Milburn report. The recommendations will be out in the autumn, but I know that the team are already looking at that and seeing how we can get ahead of the game. And in our policy development roles, we'll certainly pursue that, because it is probably the single most important thing for this city, that we get young people into quality jobs.
Certainly agree with those remarks, Councillor Moynihan. Can I just answer some final reflections on one particular matter? I think many of us have reflected on NEETs, those young people who are not in education, training or employment, but we also know that there's that link between school exclusion and then unfortunately that pipeline to becoming long-term NEET and therefore worklessness. And there's been some comments earlier on about having curriculums in our schools that are fit for the future. I'd certainly agree that we need reform of our curriculum, and that's what this government is doing. I know, for example, that Reform UK said that they want to double the number of pupil referral units in our country, which obviously suggests that we would see more young people who are excluded permanently from schools. Can you just reflect, not on the political point, but just simply on that link between exclusions and NEETs?
I mean, I look to Richard slightly in this, but I'll make a start. So certainly, you know, Richard's team oversees the statutory responsibility for reporting on young people not in education, employment and training at 16 and 17-year-olds. And the statistics that Richard's team produces are excellent comparatively to elsewhere in the country and really highlighting some of the issues that lead to young people being not in education, employment and training. One of them most certainly is the statistics show the rise in elective home educated young people is a real indicator of needs. Another particular one is attendance, but Richard would be able to talk much more about this than I would. I think also it's probably worth mentioning about the Community Mission Challenge, which has been an initiative that was awarded to 3 cities in the country where we had a lot of government departments. We obviously have DFE and DWP heavily present in the city. And we chose to focus on young people not in education, employment and training, and actually having a look at following those young people, because where our statutory responsibility stops to report on them, actually we then don't have a record of what happens to people beyond that. And so we have done some work around trying to look at that and gain more information about not just the causes, but also, the causes of people becoming not in education, employment and training, but equally some of the positives and identifying where in that journey they are most likely to fall out of the system and what that longer term impact is. So we hope to sort of have a phase 2 of that, but it's very much something being led by Richard, and you can grill him more about it in future.
Thank you. And the committee will look forward to, no doubt, seeing Richard at some point as well. I know that he and his team do some excellent work, as do yourself and Kevin. So thank you very much for bringing our report today. In fact, Richard is going to be on our agenda later. Apologies, Richard. Item number 8 was the Pathways to Work report. Now, it's on page 23 to 54 of our agenda pack, but it does contain recommendations that are on page 24. Are we all agreed? Now, if any member wishes to dissent, then please do raise your hand to indicate dissent. Otherwise, I'll take the colleagues being agreed. Colleagues, are we agreed? I can see nodding. And no dissent. So therefore, that item has been carried. Thank you very much, colleagues, for that discussion, but also thank you very much for officers for presenting and the whole team behind it as well. Item 9 is an opportunity for us to talk about the Adult Skills Fund allocation from SIMCA to SCMC. It's on page 55 to 74 of your agenda pack. Now, it's a relatively technical but very detailed report. It's a very important one, and it seeks approval to accept 2.27 million of funding from South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority and South Yorkshire's Mayoral of Coppard to support Sheffield's lifelong learning and skills service. In many ways, those people who have been on the committee for some time will be aware that it builds on the report that we've just considered on Pathways to Work. Both are about equipping people with the skills and confidence and opportunities they need to be able to access good employment and to improve their life chances. And for the benefit of newer members of the committee, the Lifelong Learning and Skills Service provides family, adult and community learning across the city. Now, some of that provision is delivered directly by SCC, whilst other elements are delivered through partnerships with organisations right across the city. There's also a service that supports post-16 learners with special educational needs and disabilities, as well as delivers apprenticeships. Now, colleagues, last week I had the privilege of visiting one of our adult skills courses and seeing some of the work in action for myself. I spent time with Sam Mitchell, one of our excellent tutors down at Morpeth, who was delivering a 2-week construction course designed to help learners gain their CSCS green card and therefore be able to access careers in the construction industry. Afterwards, I did write to Sam to thank him for the opportunity to visit. What struck me most was how engaged those learners were. As a school teacher, I know that engaging people in learning isn't always easy, but the quality of discussion, the confidence which those learners demonstrated and participation levels, and that really supportive atmosphere in the room was genuinely impressive. And in particular, I spoke to one learner who had faced significant challenges in his life. He was a prison leaver who was now taking a real leading role in discussions in that learning space and really problem solving with the group. And it was a really powerful reminder of just how important this work is, giving people that leg up and a chance in life, as well as helping us as a city to tackle our neat figures. Sometimes, colleagues, I think we can lose sight of the real human impact of our work that our services deliver, and visits like this are a really useful reminder and quite sobering when it comes to the work that really matters that's been provided on the ground. So thank you very much. Now, I am going to hand over to Richard, who's going to take members through the detail of the report and the recommendations before we move to any questions in a discussion. Richard, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Miskell. So I'm Richard Smith. I'm the head of the service that Councillor Miskell's introduced, head of lifelong learning and skills. And my service sits within the Belonging Directorate, and I'm here with my director today.
Hi, councillors. I'm Steve Kay. I'm the Director of Belonging. I didn't have a badge today. This was Andrew, who left a few years ago, I believe. But yeah, I'm Steve Kay.
So Steve and I are here just to run you through the agenda item and the report. As Councillor Miskell's already laid out, this is a grant that our service has been receiving for over a decade, probably maybe more like 20 years, into the city to support adult learners. And when we say adult learners, we mean people aged 19 and above. That's the funding the government releases. It used to come directly from government. It now comes through South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority, and it for the city of Sheffield, it equates to £2.27 million. The largest provider in the city is the Sheffield College, and there are other smaller providers. Similarly, other parts of the region get their grant funding through SIMCA as well. Within the grant fund, there are stipulations around what we can deliver with that, and there are two main aspects of it. One is known as adult skills, and that tends to relate to qualification-based provision, a lot of work around functional skills, digital skills, English as a second language. We do work around vocational skills and some family learning as well. The other aspect of the Adult Skills Fund is known as tailored learning, and the distinction to make is that tailored learning gives us some flexibilities and freedoms about how we deliver it. It doesn't necessarily have to lead to a qualification, but as Councillor Miskell's already laid out, the value of that type of learning is there are a multitude of different ways that can support people. It often works as a stepping stone onto provision for adults back into education. It can work and support people in terms of community access, in terms of independence, in terms of supporting their own children with their learning, and it, as I say, is a stepping stone onto the more formal qualification-based learning. As a council, as a service, our focus, our USP, if you like, is looking at the entry levels into learning, the lower levels of learning, and we do that up to and including level 2, which is equivalent to a GCSE. Most of our work is at entry level or at level 1, and that's how we use the 2.27 million. That amount has remained static over the last certainly 4 years, which is positive in the sense that nationally there has been a cut in adult skills funding, and we have been able to retain the amount of funding that we've received by way of SIMCA's grant remaining static. In terms of how we use that money, Councillor Miskell's already laid out that we work, and it relates to the previous conversation, work closely with community organisations across Sheffield, and we subcontract about a quarter of the money that we receive to those community organisations. The reason we do that is threefold. It tends to be
related to areas of high demand that our service and our teachers haven't got capacity to meet. It relates to niche areas of delivery, specific vocational areas, or areas where there is a requirement that, again, we haven't got the specialism to meet. And finally, it relates to the community organisations themselves and the trusted relationship they have with communities. So it enables us to reach into communities that might otherwise be difficult to do so. What we're bringing the paper for today is an annual cycle of activity where we look to the committee for agreement to receive that funding and agreement to use that funding to support the adults of Sheffield in the way that I've just laid out. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, for taking us through that. I can see that I think Councillor Rees was indicating to speak. Any other colleagues wish to make a contribution? Take another round in a second. Councillor Rees.
Wonderful, thank you. We're doing a repeat of last year where, thanks to my studious reading of the committee agenda prior to the meeting, I come armed with questions, and I distinctly remember sitting in this very seat this time last year, my first time on this committee, asking the question of this funding has been frozen since 2023-2024 at a rate of 2.27 million. It was 2.27 million the year after, and it was 2.27 million the year after that. I remember asking Councillor Maroof whether he would have a conversation with the Mayor of South Yorkshire or officers in his absence as to whether or not we can see that increased, because it is a real terms cut in our ability to provide adult skills and training as a city, given that everything else is getting more expensive. I hope that the conversations have been had, but obviously it has not been gone through. So I ask this of yourselves as the officers, but also of the Chair. Will you have a conversation with the Mayor of South Yorkshire to return the Adult Skills Fund grant that we have, or we get from the Mayor of South Yorkshire, to the inflation-adjusted rate that it should be at from at least 2023, 2024, but I would welcome if it didn't keep up with inflation at some point prior, because every pound that we have less to spend on training in this city for those over the age of 19 is a person that is having their economic future, their security hampered because of decisions elsewhere. Now, I listened in to Prime Minister-elect Andy Burnham's speech, and he promised growth in every postcode. I know that it will be Manchester because he loves talking about Manchester, but it is often that Yorkshire is forgotten. So I'm wondering whether that growth in every postcode will include growth in adult skills funding for the people of Sheffield. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just go to Councillor Maroof, who might want to reflect on some of those discussions, bearing in mind that I've been in post for about a month now, so it will be good to hear a little bit more.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard, for the report, because in the last year we have worked quite closely together on this and seen the impact this funding does have on people, especially the 19 pluses, and some of the venues that we went to where this is actually been the work is actually being done. People there were really appreciative of it, and the main concern was, can we get a job out of it at the end of it? One I went to was on a Friday morning, and to see so many people in the facility on a Friday morning around music, etc., was absolutely brilliant. I remember you pointing out that these were people that really didn't want to go to school, but loved coming here. So in answer to your question, Chair, the conversations were had, and I think I did have a conversation with the Mayor as well. And I think the message from me is that we continue. This is not for me to tell you to do this, but it's entirely up to you whether you do it or not. But that we really need to get some more funding in this particular area, because it's an area that needs it, and it's an area that is the number of people that are in this cohort are increasing all the time, and therefore I think the small amount of resources that Richard and his team have got. And this is what I've shared with Richard and with Kate when I was on this area, is that the funding is just not sufficient, honestly. It's not there to support everybody. because we can ask as many questions as we like here, but if the funding isn't actually there, then there's very little that we can do. And all we're going to draw is a lot of criticism towards us to say we're not delivering. So the call out or reach out now is that we really need to ask for more funding. And I'm sure, I know you can't make any political comments here, but we really need to call out the mayoral authority.
Well, we certainly do continue to make that case for more funding for Sheffield, and I'll do that at each and every opportunity, Councillor Maroof and Councillor Rees. And I think you make a really important point about inflation. It's hit people in their pockets, hasn't it, since Liz Truss crashed our economy, and we've seen the detrimental impact of that, as well as that decision 10 years ago with Brexit. It would be unfair for me to ask Richard to reflect on the political points, but is there anything else that you would like to add that's outside of the political sphere, Richard?
Only to say that we work very closely with South Yorkshire's Combined Authority. There is scope within the grant agreement at sort of the midpoint of the academic year to review our delivery plan. So we have to set a delivery plan for the year and to request growth if we feel that we can demonstrate that can be delivered in an efficient way. We have done that previously, and that's certainly something I'll take with me from today's meeting, and we'll look at that with our colleagues at Simca to see how we can deliver growth. They're looking at it from a regional point of view, but I'm more than happy to pursue that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard, for adding clarity about those arrangements. It's very, very useful. Apologies, I'm kind of out of step with where we are on our list. I think we've had Councillor Rees, we've had Councillor Maroof. I think we're at Councillor Davies. Apologies, Councillor Smith and Councillor Moynihan, if I missed you out, but Councillor Davies.
Yeah, thanks. Well, council officers obviously can't comment on the political point. I do feel that actually Brexit probably isn't where it started. I think Brexit was a symptom of the earlier 2008 financial crash, which I think was in part contributed to by successive governments failing to crack down on financial institutions, something that I think is still hugely lacking in today's government.
Thank you very much. Do I see any other colleague wishing to make a contribution? I don't. Therefore, we'll move to the recommendations for this particular item. So the recommendations are on page 56, but before we do that, I think Councillor Rees. Councillor Rees.
Yeah, sorry, I missed one of the questions I was asked, and this is a less political one, and I'm going to at this point, thank you for the report. I forgot to do so earlier because I know how brilliant the work that you do is with the adult skills funding, especially, well, given the tightening belts that you have to do, it's really quite heartening to see people wanting to put that effort in. My question is around the performance report that we'll be seeing in a future agenda item. I will be covering it in this, but the employment market is changing. The rates of NEETs is increasing. The very, very speedy adoption and rollout of artificial intelligence, large language models and automation within a lot of entry-level jobs is a deep concern for me, especially for those roles which might have been taken up by those leaving the lifelong learning scheme kind of framework. And I'm just wondering what adaptations are you making to the qualifications, to the kind of the learning frameworks and the provision to reflect the rapidly changing kind of employment landscape that a lot of these kind of course leavers will be going into.
It's obviously a very pertinent point given where the changes are happening at such a pace. What we do as a service every year is have a curriculum review, and we look at the offer that we make within our digital skills curriculum. We have made some adaptations already. I think it's fair to say more are needed. The pace of change is rapid. An annual curriculum review doesn't keep pace with that change. What we will do, what we are doing through our subcontracting, as well as looking for organisations that are willing to work with us who have some of that expertise. For us as a service, because of the entry-level qualifications that we offer, I think a lot of that then stems into the movement of of our adults, I should say, onto further learning. And the Sheffield College, as I said earlier, is a big partner in that. And one of our roles within this sector, although Simca are the lead in terms of the region, we have a role and we convene an adult skills forum. In fact, we've got our next adult skills forum next week. I chair that with colleagues from within the council. So at next week's forum, I think it would be absolutely appropriate to bring that up there and have a conversation, because that's all about bringing together all of the adult skills providers in the city. We have our USP, if you like, we have our place in it. We need to be developing this, but we need to see the collective sort of Sheffield landscape working together on that. So I appreciate that point, and I'll take it to our adult skills forum next week.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rees and Richard, for that response. Colleagues, the recommendations of our report are on page 56 of your agenda pack. Can I ask whether we're all agreed now? If any member wishes to dissent, then please do raise your hand. Can I see colleagues nodding if they're in agreement? See no dissent, so therefore that has been carried. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Richard, as well, for bringing that to us today. Item number 10 is the performance report annual review. Now, it's on page 75 to 104, and it's the committee's second performance report against a set of measures that were agreed by previous iterations of this committee. Now, Jen, Ricard and Sam Blakeman will take members through the technical details shortly as our policy specialists. As I understand it, Jen understandably has some childcare commitments at 4, so may well not be able to follow this item entirely through, and we do understand that you have to leave, and that's absolutely fine. I guess it's important to say to members that members will see that the report distinguishes between measures that provide that kind of that wider economic context, which are influenced by local, national and global factors, and therefore aren't within the Council's direct control, but are still important for this committee to be mindful of, as well as service performance measures where we can more directly track the impact of our direct interventions here at this committee. Now, before Jen and Sam present the report, I want to bring some of the figures to life by highlighting just a few examples that demonstrate the difference that contributions that are outlined in this report bring to our city. I guess the first relates to the support that's provided by our excellent colleagues at Business Sheffield, and I can see that Yvonne, who leads that service, is here today. Members will see reference in the report to the support given to Expan, which is a Sheffield-based company that specialises in the design, manufacture and installation of advanced bridge solutions. They do some absolutely outstanding work. Now, through the support that's been provided by Business Sheffield that's alluded to in the report, including a productivity grant, the company was able to invest in additional cranes and equipment, helping it to increase productivity, reduce downtime and unlock significant business growth. And as a result of that, the company was able to increase its turnover by £1 million. Now, for me, that is exactly the kind of practical, solutions-focused support that brings our growth plan to life. It's about supporting Sheffield businesses to grow, to create opportunities, and to strengthen our local economy here in the city. I'd also like to highlight one other area covered by the report, and that's our success in attracting major cultural and sporting events to our city, which previous members of this committee will be very well aware of. Earlier this year, Sheffield hosted the ISU European Figure Skating Championships. That was an event that generated almost 8 million in economic impact. It supported jobs across our city. It brought thousands of visitors into Sheffield's hotels, restaurants, shops and cultural venues. So just as importantly, it of course also showcased Sheffield on that international stage, reaching audiences of tens of millions of people around the world and reinforcing that reputation that we have as a successful host of major events in our city. So as a committee, we're rightly proud of the role of culture, of sports and events, and that they play in our economy. They bring visitors, they create jobs, they support businesses, and they help us to tell Sheffield's story about why people should invest and live here. And taken together, these examples, in my mind at least, demonstrate the breadth of this committee's work, whether it's supporting local businesses to grow, equipping people with new skills, attracting investment, or showcasing Sheffield internationally. Our aim is the same. It's about strengthening our city's economy, it's about tackling inequality, it's about creating opportunities for residents, and ultimately putting more money in Sheffielders' back pockets. With that, colleagues, I'll hand over to Jem and Sam. Appreciate and completely understand that, Jen, you'll have to leave at some point, and that's absolutely fine, to take us through the report and answer any questions that members might have, and also appreciate the support of Justin too, so thank you.
Just by way of introduction, I just say Jen's here as part of the economic development team who pulls this report together. And obviously, as you mentioned, Chair, it covers a mix of measures that just characterise the city, not necessarily our services, as well as where we might have some services. But in case there are any detailed questions, we do have service heads in the room as well who may come up when Jen certainly has to go if there's any specific questions around Business Sheffield or around the culture team. So they're waiting in the wings. But over to Jen.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you. So just to introduce the paper briefly, this report is part of SCC's performance framework. So every policy committee has a role in monitoring performance across the council, and if they're not doing it, they will be doing it shortly. These measures were agreed by the committee back in October 2025, and the first report was in February this year. So this is the second report. As it's already been alluded to, there are a combination of service measures and measures that just kind of inform you about the wider economic context of the city. The recommendations within the report ask for feedback on improvements, and in fact, some members may notice, hopefully, that we have made a few changes from the last report to build on the feedback we received for it back in February. But so far we haven't made any changes to the actual measures because we wanted to make sure there was some consistency between reports. And it's proposed that the next report is when we can discuss adding additional measures. This report acts as an annual review, as it's kind of marking the end of Q4, but actually in putting the report together, we realised that there's quite a lag time for some of the data sets, and you may have noticed that yourself when you're looking at some of the data from 2023. So it means that we think it would, in the future, the annual review would work better on in the municipal year, we're suggesting into the autumn. So the report also contains a recommendation for that. Just a final point on the report, I just need to highlight a presentation issue, both in the cover report and the dashboard narrative. It relates to the number of business startups, which is EDSC 011, if you're interested. And it's also in the first paragraph of the report under 2.91. And it states that Sheffield is mid-pack in terms of startups amongst the 8 English core cities. We often use core cities comparisons across our data to show how it just helps us to compare Sheffield with other similar places with a similar mix of business sectors and skills and population demographics. In this case, that data wasn't calculated in the way we'd normally calculate it. Sheffield is in fact last of the core cities for business startups. This is not a new thing. This is a historical trend of Sheffield's and similar to quite a lot of other kind of headline economic measures. But I just wanted to highlight that. But I do also want to highlight that that measure masks some really interesting stuff going on behind that of different sectors seeing really impressive growth stats.
And just on that point, I think technically by number, it's right.
Yes.
That's right. So but it is fourth out of the core cities in number, but if you compare it by population, it's lower.
Yes. I do have a summary running through all the figures, but I am conscious of time, so I didn't know if and I have some slides, but if I'm happy to just leave it there if that's enough, or if you want any further information.
I am minded to take the views of committee, but if there's 1 or 2 slides, we'd love to see them, if you still do have time.
Yeah, That's fine. Okay, so I've already mentioned about the business startups. So similar, it links very nicely to the point I just made around GVA, or gross value added, sorry, trying to avoid the acronyms. It's a measure of productivity, and another one that Sheffield has historically underperformed on compared to other big cities. And this graph shows a common trend that we're improving, but we're not improving as much as the other core cities. Also, just to flag, this is one of the ones where there is quite a lag in the data. I think this data is from like 2023. Then on to the next slide, please. There, just as for context around the activity of Business Sheffield, which is really trying to help to improve this business dynamism. So we've already mentioned about the productivity and low carbon projects, but there's also a lot of work to support startups and scale-ups. Business Sheffield supported over 1,825 businesses last year. And then, so I can just skip forward 2 slides, yeah, this one. And then this is a very nice example of the impact of the DWP announcement at West Bar. If you can see what an impact that had on office take-up in Q4. On to the next slide, please. We're into kind of the culture and creative sector here, and there's not a lot of new data yet. Hoping for the next report we will have some more updates. But overall, just to say, Sheffield has seen significant growth in its cultural and creative industries. This sector is identified in the Sheffield Growth Plan as a real kind of specialist sector for the city, so really good to see that trend. There are also other measures in the report relating to visitor economy, and they show growth, but again, they will be updated, hopefully for the next report. And Q4 also includes the figure skating championships and the positive impact on hotel occupancy. Then on to employment, skills and economy, and the next slide, thank you. Unemployment is rising. Again, this is an economic context measure, but good context, particularly with the other things we've discussed this meeting. This reflects a national picture, and this graph shows how, in this case, Sheffield is below the core city average, which is a good thing, but it is higher than the national average. And then on to economic inactivity is the next slide, which we've already kind of covered, but again, similar trend of being lower in Sheffield than the core cities. There were just, and as a service context, between 2025 and 26, there were 3,254 participants in SCC employment and skills programmes, and 928 people gained sustainable employment. And then my final slide is on social value. And this is the work that SCC does with planning and procurement processes, and it generated 619 jobs last year, jobs and apprentices, sorry. And this was a significant increase from the year before, but it is dependent on SCC activity. So last year that included the Everyone Active contract taking over management of leisure facilities, Forge Masters building a new forge, and housing development work with ESH. And then not on the slides, but just a few other summaries. Lifelong learning and skills. So this is kind of Richard's area. The summary shows a further fall in the proportion of students receiving a sustained education, apprenticeship or employment. But again, this reflects wider increases in unemployment and economic activity nationally. But on a service level, the lifelong learning apprenticeship team continues an upward trend in retention and has achievement rates despite recruitment being challenging. On to major events. The council-supported events attracted over 850,000 attendees and generated more than 52 million in economic impact for the city. The events in Q3 and Q4 include the figure skating and the British Universities and Colleges Sports Nationals, but it lists all the kind of major events. And then last but not least, under the Accountable Body Service, initial analysis suggests that the investment zone business rate retention area will generate a net growth of around £300,000 from 25 to 26. That final amount will be shared with Simca. So hopefully that's a helpful summary, a bit of a canter through, but very happy to take questions along with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you very much also to Sam for your contribution. We appreciate, Sam, you're relatively new to the organisation, so welcome, and thank you very much for putting the paper together. I'll go to Councillor Moynihan, and then I think I've got Councillor Davies, Councillor Moynihan, and then Councillor Move. Councillor Moynihan.
It's not so much a question, it's more of a comment, and you can agree or disagree with it, so I suppose it's half a question. Seems to me that these metrics really help us focus on areas of work that we need to do as a committee. It's obvious there where we've got to focus. That is going to inform our work programme moving forwards. And there's nothing there that's particularly surprising to me, given that deindustrialisation happened later in Sheffield than in Leeds or Manchester. So in developing, we will have much later in developing alternative sectors, and I think that's something to bear in mind. So there's inherent structural issues there that we've got to tackle. What I'm not surprised at is the increasing role of employment and growth in the cultural industries. And I think that's where we can really focus on getting those startup levels higher, because there are a lot of small independent startups that are just springing out there. Councillor Miskell and I will be attending Crosswires on Friday evening, and just the energy and dynamism of that sector is fascinating. I know Councillor Rees referred to the nighttime economy and the social and cultural activities earlier, but just to stress, I think there's real opportunities there to increase those business startups. But there's nothing there that is surprising, but it does allow us to focus on what we want, areas we want to prioritise for the work programme.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for those reflections, Councillor Moynihan. I'll just go to Jen and team for any reflections you might have on that, but mindful that you may well simply agree or just offer some cursory remark.
Jen might have comments. I mean, no, I wasn't disagreeing at all. What I was going to suggest was there's a measure in there which I don't think Jen covered in the summary about job density in the city, which I think comes back to your point about deindustrialisation. So there's some contradictions, as any big city is a city of contradictions, but Sheffield is in a sense that some of the medium wage levels are higher than the core city's average, but actually we've got fewer jobs in the city than the core city's average, so people have to leave the city, to get that. But when they do, they tend to command higher wages, and they can bring that back, but they don't bring it on a day-to-day basis where they're working. So there's some interesting dynamics there, where the growth plan comes into in terms of growing our strength sectors going forward, the growth of creative industries you mentioned, tech and digital growth. Somebody was mentioning earlier about AGIC, a company just down the road, one of the few companies in the world now actually manufacturing quantum computers, 10 minutes walk from here. So there's some really interesting things happening in the city. The Innovation Spine programme is supporting that, but it does feel like we're still playing catch up on that job density figure. We need to grow more jobs in the city.
I'd just like to add that, one of the purposes of this report is to help inform you as you make decisions, but it's also to kind of, I guess, say that shouldn't be your only interaction with this data. We use data and we use this information as part of a lot of our policy making, and you should see it in other reports. This shouldn't be the only place where you see it.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Davies, Councillor Maroof, and then Councillor Smith. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, just got a comment and a question. Thanks to Councillor Miskell for the really good summary of the events and stuff at the beginning of this section. I just want to make sure that we don't focus too heavily on the economic contributions of events in this city. I'm glad to see we've got sort of social value measures as well. I think things like Kelham Pride and the Crazy Races event in the city centre the other week are really, really good. They may not add much necessarily directly to the economy of the city, but I think they help people to live happy, healthy lives, and kind of holistically contribute to pretty much all of the work that this committee is trying to do. The question though, so I'm a recent business starter myself. I've owned a small company as a sole trader for a couple of years in sort of managing land for biodiversity. sort of as a wildlife gardener and groundsperson, which I'm currently kind of transferring into a community interest company kind of model, partly to hopefully attract grant funding. And what I've noticed in that time is that there seems to be very little grant funding specifically for services to biodiversity. There's a lot, rightly so, on funding kind of transfer to net zero economy and kind of moving away from fossil fuel energy production and things like this, which is brilliant. But I think given that Sheffield City Council 5 years ago declared a nature emergency, I would like to see a bit more done when we're talking about environmental sustainability on biodiversity services, helping entrepreneurs like myself to start those businesses, to receive grant funding, and just, I think, maybe a bit more recognition of their importance to achieving net zero ambitions. So is there kind of much work in the pipeline along those lines? Any assurances you can give?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Davies, for your kind remarks at the very start of your contribution. And you did mention Kelham Pride, which was interesting. And we shouldn't underestimate the financial contribution of events like that. And, of course, also that Sheffield Crazy Race that happened the other Sunday. Just for the Awareness Committee, we had 11,500 attendees at Kelham Pride in 2025, but 16,000 in 2026. And we shouldn't underestimate the economic impact on our city of that number of visitors, both in kind of bed spaces in our hotels, but also in spending right across the city as well. And no doubt over the coming weeks when colleagues in that specific team in the City Council are able to crunch the numbers, they'll be able to tell us an actual figure for the economic impact of events like that. But on the wider points, I'll just turn to officers for any reflections.
Yeah, it's a very good point on biodiversity, and as the Green City and as so much of the excellent development in the city centre around sustainable urban drainage and the Greater Green Scheme, I think it is something we possibly could look to play into more. One opportunity might be the local nature recovery plan that the Combined Authority has recently published. So looking at some of the economic business benefits of delivering that plan is something we probably need to be working with them more on. That's a really important point. And that there have been dedicated business support programmes through decarbonisation grants, which again we've managed to fund through Combined Authority money. Again, that is a conversation we can have on an ongoing basis as we review those about whether or not we can spread that. What I would say is, I guess, any kind of businesses are open to the support that's on offer. So again, it's a bit like the pathways to work. Yes, there are targeted sort of some targeted schemes, but there are some universal schemes that can help businesses tap into those decarbonisation, energy saving measures, productivity grant measures as well, which would apply to a landscape biodiversity focused company as well. So, but happy to have conversations, and the same goes for all cabinet members really. Cabinet members, forgive me. I've been in cabinet systems before committee systems, and I'm still slipping into the language. Committee members, elected members, we're really happy as a team, as Business Sheffield actually, particularly for members who haven't been in the council for very long, to explain a little bit more about what our high street advisors do, what our sustainable and tech advisors do, because there's a whole team out there which Councillor Maroof will be possibly aware of more than most, but there's a real team out there. But that's a really good reflection actually on the biodiversity agenda and something we can take away.
Thank you. And Councillor Davies?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, I think the support that Business Sheffield give is excellent and needs to continue, absolutely. It's been a big help to me, and I think I've probably underutilised it.
It's good to hear. You know, some of the work that Business Sheffield does is absolutely brilliant in our city. I've got Councillor Maroof and then Councillor Smith. Councillor Maroof.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three basic observations here and something to build upon really, moving into the next year. One is around the income generated through visitors, with the visitor economy. I was absolutely staggered when I found out the figure was 1.85 billion, I'm calling it million, which is a staggering amount of money. And on the back of that, what we did do was to pull a group of people together from the hospitality industries, and we did get quite good feedback from them of what we can potentially do moving forward into the next few years. And one of the key things that came out of it is having Sheffield as a city break, which sounds quite adventurous, but it's not that adventurous, to be fair. If you've got those sort of figures and you've got the Peak District nearby and some of the stuff that we've got here in Sheffield, like the home of football and all sorts of things like that that were raised in that session, I think it's absolutely doable, and it's something that I would like officers to make some comments on whether it is actually worth just pursuing that even further to moving into the next few years. It's not going to happen overnight, because one of the things that we don't have is a Sheffield airport. And I know we talk about Sheffield Doncaster, but Doncaster is really in Doncaster, but that's my view anyway from being in Sheffield. But we did have an airport at one time, so that's one observation and a question. The second observation is around the business support team that we have within the council. I had the privilege of visiting very many local businesses and local business centres, and three things keep coming back to me time and time again. One is business rates, which are obviously something that we just collect. We can't do anything further on, and trying to explain that to people becomes very difficult. Second is rental levels, and the third one is basically continuity and some form of recognition that the local authority aren't going to come up with any policies that may well impinge businesses as they grow. And don't shout at me what I'm about to say now, is things like double red lines don't help when we start talking about double red lines in the council. It does concern people, and if you see what's happened to Ecclesall Road, that it's there to be seen that lots of businesses did actually leave Ecclesall Road because of the double red lines. Similar situation with Abbeydale Road as well. So these are sort of things that we need to be very careful as a local authority. A comment from us carries a huge amount of weight out there, and businesses are already struggling. And in Sheffield, we've got some organic growth of business, like London Road has really organically grown. And there's other areas which are growing, like the Abbeydale Cultural Quarter and Ecclesall and Hillsborough, and you look around, and people are doing it themselves despite of us. But the fact is that business advisors, when I've actually been around with them, do provide a fantastic service, and therefore, again, the call out there is continue that. We shouldn't keep sending some mixed messages out as an authority, and I include myself in that, by the way, as well. And thirdly, to see if we can support financially the team a little bit more than what we do at the present time. And finally, I can say a lot about it, but I'll just finish on this one because I'm conscious of time. Around the cultural industries, I was absolutely amazed with how much cultural activities take place in this city and the amount of people that they actually bring to this city, not just the European figure skating that you talked about, Chair. There's other stuff that happens organically in the city that attracts numerous people into the city, and we don't make a contribution to it directly, but in kind we may do. And I think what we need to do as a team, where we can't support financially, at least give them the recognition that the city is behind them. And I think I said that in one of the sessions here when there was a report on the culture policy, that we need to continue to do that. It doesn't cost us anything, but it supports us heavily. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maroof. I think you make some really pertinent points there. Any reflections from Councillor, from officer colleagues, and I may come back on some of those points too.
Just on the specific point around city breaks, absolutely. So I think the team did run a city break campaign earlier this year, which again was funded through Local Growth Fund for combined authority. And again, coming back to another point actually about the economic impact of events, there is a tool that we're working with our colleagues in leisure services around looking at social benefits of these events as well. So it's not just about the economy, but that's often sort of the starting point, assessing the impact of these things. But on the City Breaks campaign, my understanding is, again, there was a calculation that for the sort of £40,000 or £50,000 I think we spent on a City Break campaign, there was about £4 million worth of benefit from that. And that was just earlier this year. So that's something we're definitely going to be building on. And there's a couple of recent, I think it's Condé Nast magazine, and there was best weekend breaks for hen nights sort of weekend magazine recently. You get these things all the time, but actually the city is in the forefront of some of that stuff as well. From the Time Out commented on it as well. So I think we're definitely in that space. On the cultural vibrancy point, yeah, there's a huge amount of work happening, sort of particularly with our grassroots cultural organisations, which you said that's where the organic growth is. And to a certain extent, they don't want the council rocking up all the time and attending their meetings, but actually we've got a working relationship with some of the sort of grassroots organisations that's really positive now through the cultural strategy, networking events, culture club and so on, which if anyone's not signed up to the City Council's culture bulletin, you really should be, because it's, you know, it shows on a day-to-day basis what's going on across the city. So there's a couple of points there. On business rates, absolutely, we hear from businesses all the time through our high street advisors that they're a real challenge at the time. It's a national system. Obviously, it's sensitive in terms of where discretion can be given, because if you give one business, you know, a reduced rate, then there's an expectation that would follow, and it's quite a challenging system. That's why it's important. It's in the report around the business rate retention impact. So this is really early days, but through the investment zone, there's a specific designated zone that government agreed that actually we get to keep more of the proceeds of that. It has to get rechanneled into the investment zone geography, but for us that stretches from the city centre through to, you know, the Olympic Legacy Park and beyond, and Runway Park and the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. So as I say, we expect that to be about £300,000 from the last year, which we do share. There's a shared model with the combined authority, but hopefully that's the thin end of the wedge, and that will grow as some of those sort of particular large units that pay a lot of business rates will be growing in that corridor, and then we've got more control over that and we can reinvest that into those communities.
Thank you very much, Justin, for those reflections. I think you make a very important point, Councillor Maroof, about city breaks in our city. Sheffield's a great destination for people to come and stay over the weekend, and people are doing that in their droves. I think Red Routes is a really interesting point, isn't it? No doubt your colleague, Councillor Masters, who I think is on TRC, will be making that particular point when it comes to Red Routes with Councillor Alexi Diamond. I know that my party voted against Red Routes when we last discussed it on those particular roads in our city. And I think you made a really important point about Doncaster Sheffield Airport. I mean, I would say that is our airport, and it was absolutely scandalous when it was closed by Peel unilaterally, and that's why I was really pleased this morning to attend the launch of the South Yorkshire Strategic Infrastructure Inquiry Report, which has a number of lessons for us as a region, but also nationally when it comes to empowering communities like ours with the tools to be able to stop businesses from unilaterally closing strategic assets like that. You know, and I'm really pleased now that DSA is safeguarded thanks to the support of the Mayor over there in Doncaster, Ros, but also Oliver Coppard, and especially considering we know that Reform and those Reform councillors in Doncaster sought to stop the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport, which I think is absolutely scandalous, and I've not met anyone through door knocking in our city who is not in favour of reopening Doncaster Sheffield Airport. Councillor Smith, I'll just hand over to you.
Just to respond to that, I think we all agree that we do all agree that Doncaster Sheffield Airport should be saved and should reopen, but we just need to make sure, and our councillors in Doncaster are making sure, that that has to be done in a financially sustainable way, which doesn't leave Doncaster in a much worse position than it would otherwise have been. And we all know that it's a huge opportunity, and yeah, I'm fully behind it as well, as are everyone in Reform. So it's just trying to make sure that it's a sustainable future and can actually stay open in the future. But I have to echo the points on the red routes and the double yellow lines that companies are struggling with. I mean, I know also that there's the new type of double yellow that don't allow any stopping at any time whatsoever, springing up outside churches. And we all know that when there's a funeral, a hearse has to stop outside a church, which I think is, that sort of thing is just outrageous, if you ask me, and I have heard a lot of uproar against that. City breaks, definitely. I saw that, both with colleagues at work and with friends from elsewhere in the country I was being sent it. It was great to see Sheffield that it had actually topped a few of those tables, didn't it, which was really good. I was, however, surprised during my induction to the council this May that the word football I don't think was mentioned once, when actually we are in a World Cup year and in the home of football, and I will be asking more about the home of football scheme, which sounds really exciting, but I haven't quite got to yet in my business over the last month or so. With the lagging figures regarding South Yorkshire performance and Sheffield's performance, I'm really interested to see what the 2024-25 figures would be, especially with the introduction, I'm an engineer myself, the introduction of companies like the UK Atomic Energy Authority and the way that they've grown so hugely in the last few years. It's on the horizon already, the new site over in West Burton, which it's an absolutely huge industry, and all the companies over there are getting stuck in with it. So I think that will have a huge impact on those figures and hopefully allow us to catch up a little bit. And I think with the Business Sheffield side of things, I'm not across all the detail in that 100% at the moment, but I think whether there is or whether we can bolster some sort of kind of basic startup guide, because from my perspective, I always have these ideas, but the bureaucracy that surrounds starting a business is such a huge impedance to so many people. I think if the council can help by, even to school leavers who are 16 years old, to say, this is a couple of pages of how to start your own company, I think that sort of thing, just to get them on the right track, and could solve a lot of wider issues as well in terms of that sort of age group not having anything to do. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just go to officers for any reflections.
Yeah, I mean, on the basic startup guide, I'm honestly not sure what we do provide, so I'm happy to kind of look. I mean, we will be. What I will say is, in terms of the business advisors that we do employ, which support businesses at all stages of kind of their growth, these are people who run businesses themselves. So it's not the really expert individuals who've been there and done it, and are advising companies of all sorts. So I think the startup guide, as you've described it, is a bit of a hybrid, I guess, between the business support world and also the curriculum world that we were just speaking about with Richard, and that service. So that's something we can sort of look into. I'm looking over if there's anything more that the colleagues want to put forward on that point. That'd be welcome. But yeah, we'll take that point away. And on the STEAM, the data, I think we call it STEAM data in terms of the latest visitor data. My understanding of that is due in July.
Yes.
At some point, I mean, we're almost there, aren't we, in July? But I think it's later in July, I think.
Yes, so for November, I think.
Yeah. So we'll have that ready for the November report in terms of reporting the next quarter data, but we can certainly liaise with the chair, and maybe if there's an opportunity to get that circulated sooner than that, with the chair's permission, we might be able to do a sooner than that briefing, but it will certainly be plugged into the autumn reporting.
Justin, we can certainly look into that. I think it sounds like a really sensible suggestion. I will just go to, I think, Councillor Rees and then Councillor Davies. Councillor Rees.
Yes, so my first question relates to table EDSC 001, and this is not for the officers because it is a explicitly political question.
Sorry, Councillor Rees, just for clarity, what page is that on?
This is on, so it's the first table of the report, not 92, I think. And it's you, Councillor Miskell. It's the first table of the appendix.
It unhelpfully doesn't have page numbers, does it? Or they're printed very, very small.
It's related to unemployment rates for the working age populations. So go to the first page of the tables. Between kind of the time of the general election in 2024, when Labour came to power, and now, the unemployment rate in Sheffield has risen by 50%, compared to no change being seen in the other core cities. Now, the narrative provided by the council officers is that there is a weakening labour market. I will assume that this is related to a slowing level of growth in Sheffield and also high employer costs. Now, the weakening labour market, we are still as a city dominated by manufacturing, which has been hampered by Brexit and by Donald Trump's tariffs on trade into the US, but also the Labour government's continued restrictions on international students coming to this country to study, which has severely damaged our university's economic outcomes. National insurance contributions, something that was laid as a trap by the former Conservative government, has been continued by the Labour government, but then also just weighting that cost on to the businesses themselves. But then also business rates and the changes to those. One instance in my ward saw a business see their business rates increase, or the rateable value increase by 384%, which they were not capable of paying and therefore had to close. And I've had it on good authority from the owner that they had a strong future with conversations with other potential investors. So I'm just wondering whether the Chair, Councillor Miskell, yourself, would, with the incoming premiership of Andy Burnham, whether he would kind of match my call to get closer to the European Union, to improve our trade for our manufacturing sector, to open up the opportunities for international students to support our universities, but also to have a look at national insurance contributions, how they are disproportionately affecting small businesses, but also business rates, which were not fully thought out when they were changed, therefore helping the economics of this city.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. I'm minded also just to ask for the committee's support in extending our guillotine, I think, by half an hour, because that's about to fall. I think Councillor Rees makes some really important points. As I understand it, Andy Burnham certainly made a pledge to review national insurance contributions, and I think that's something that we should certainly look at. And I think there have been also other calls when it comes to VAT, when it comes to the hospitality industry. I think he makes a number of other points on a number of other matters about our broader economy in our city, which I think are very well made. Quite clearly, it emphasises the need for us to redouble our support for the growth plan in our city. I'll just go to any other colleagues who wish to make contributions. Councillor Moynihan.
Sorry, I had a few more.
Apologies, Councillor Rees. I'm advised, I'll just go to Robert with regards to the substance of questions. I think we're all learning our feet when it comes to these new governance arrangements. I'll just turn to Robert to offer some legal advice. Robert.
I was just not necessarily making a specific comment on questions put, but I think it's just important to keep in mind that questions should be on the reports of the officers rather than put to the Chair on the Chair's stance generally. So just encourage that we're confident and comfortable that any questions put are through you, Chair, to the report, which obviously it's in the Chair's discretion as to how those are put and how those are responded to, but that's just a general comment on coverage.
Thank you, Robert. I think that clarity is really, really useful. Clearly, we're all learning our feet in this new system. Councillor Rees, mindful of what advice Robert has given, your next question.
Yeah, that was the only one, don't worry. I think we do need to remember that this council is an inherently political body, that the decisions made elsewhere by party political kind of organisations, that being the government in Westminster, do have an explicit impact on the economic kind of prospects of this city. And as we all introduced ourselves, we gave our party affiliation, and what we say in that will be reflected upon our party. So it is more towards a chair of an advocacy, and I would also be making the same ask of Councillor Maroof, had he been the chair, just with a different slant on it, that these questions do need to be asked. Now, the follow-ups, and I've got a few of these, and these are all procedural. I like data visualisation. I think we do need to be clearer. So, one, and I'll illustrate these. Just to illustrate, where is it? What is a high growth enterprise? I don't expect answers now, but this is just because I think we do need to clarify these things in the documentation. The data on EDSC 010, which is the business startup and closures. Now, I'm not entirely sure how we might be able to do this, but a business startup and a business closure, if it is 1 for 1, is numerically the same, but the value and kind of economic impact of that is different. Curzon Cinema closing and a coffee shop opening nominally cancel each other out. Economically, they do not. So if we could find a way of illustrating that rather than just raw numbers, that would be wonderful. On data where we have a month-by-month run, so in, for example, EDSC 014, if we could have a smoothing line, kind of a moving average across it, because it is quite difficult to see. And also, I know Councillor Miskell knows the Lib Dems' propensity for questionable bar charts that don't always start at 0. I think sometimes we do need to accept that bar charts don't need to start at 0, and 014 is an example of that. The final point is actually a really good bit of news, and I've lost it somewhere. Where is it? Yes, so that's 046. That's jobs and apprenticeships facilitated by social value. Now, I'm a great admirer of the apprenticeship system. From age 16 all the way up to kind of people reskilling. I do think we need more across all levels. It's why I in previous years have mentored those that I work with. And to finish my last comment on a bit of good news, the work that Forge Masters and BAE Systems in Sheffield is doing is fantastic. There are young people who are being given fantastic technical training. They are providing for themselves with a good future, with economic prospects, but more importantly, being a beacon of opportunity and kind of forward progression in communities like mine, like those that Councillor Miskell, Councillor Smith and everyone on this committee and across this council represent, that we should be celebrating them and we shouldn't be shying away from organisations that are wanting to position themselves in Sheffield, have the capability, utilise the capabilities we have as a city, because that person getting an apprenticeship in Sheffield, in a technical training and earning a considerable amount of money is their future. Now, BAE Systems, what they do might be a bit squeamish to some. I would have questions about working there myself, but to those people that may have gone from working a minimum wage job to having a highly technical skilled and fruitful job where they get to pay their way and create a future for their family, we should be celebrating that. And I think it is deeply foolish to say that we want to cut businesses like BAE Systems out of Sheffield because that is jobs and opportunity for our young people across this city that we are denying them. And I, for one, do not want to be someone who is endorsing that, because I would not be able to look the people of my ward in the eye and say, I am actively making your lives worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rees, and I think, I'd like to associate myself with your remarks. I don't think there's anything to be squeamish about when it comes to providing parts for our nuclear energy sector, which Forge Masters does so well, and also producing weapons for our allies, absolutely, to keep us safe. I'll just go to Justin and Sam for any reflections.
No, I mean, on the points on the data, absolutely. This is we pulled these together as a way of trying to lift some of the data sort of off the page, and those are all really good points that will reflect as we present these going forward. We want some consistency, but where we can improve on, it's still the same data, but presenting it in a fair way. I think the comparisons with core cities are helpful, but again, if there were thoughts on other ways we could compare ourselves with others, sometimes with a tendency, sometimes we compare ourselves with South Yorkshire, and it's, you know, we find, I think, the core cities comparisons better, but again, really helpful to get suggestions on that. And yeah, we'll reflect on those and bring those back next time. On the startups, which comes back to Jen's point of clarification at the start, again, another point that I think is not necessarily right, that we also compare that by population as well. And actually, the population of Manchester City Council is a lot less than, as I mentioned before, than Sheffield City Council, but actually Manchester City Council sits right next to Trafford Council. It's a completely different economic geography. So we might need to think about how we present that sort of data in a sort of fairer way as well. So always keen to refine this. So yeah, we'll take those away.
Thank you. Apologies, I just need to check on my list. I think I've got Councillor Davies. I think then I've got Councillor Moynihan and finally Councillor Smith. If I could just ask colleagues just to keep your remarks as short as possible. Don't want to curtail debate, but mindful that we've had to extend the guillotine. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, just a few kind of brief comments. Couple of them relating to a while ago now. Support for Councillor Smith's comments about the home of football. I think it's something we need to do a lot more bragging about as the city. I'm happy to be the lone dissenting voice, it seems, in supporting Sheffield Doncaster Airport. I think with Manchester Airport being so large and so close, and actually a pretty comparable journey time, from Sheffield to Manchester, especially by public transport, it seems to me that it would actually not improve the number of city breaks all that much, but I do agree that's an important point. And more recently, we've talked about organisations like BAE Systems, and I would just challenge as the Greens did, my Green colleagues in full council the other day, sort of euphemisms around defence, meaning the supply of arms, to what, again, perhaps euphemistically we're calling allies, because I think it's quite clear that a lot of the arms that we sell in this country are going to countries and foreign states with very, very questionable records on human rights. And I think we need to bear that in mind. We have ethical procurement policies as a council for a very good reason. And I think that is a culture that we should breed across the city.
Thank you, Councillor Davies, and those comments that you've made will certainly be noted. Appreciate your political stance on that. Councillor Moynihan.
Be very brief. I really thank Councillor Rees for pointing out that this is political and is the effect of national government. So on the first chart that he originally referred to, I'd go back even further and blame the Tory Lib Dem coalition and the campaign of austerity. And you'd expect me to say that, wouldn't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moynihan, for making that point so eloquently. Councillor Smith.
I was just coming in on what was spoken about beforehand, but it slipped my mind. It may pop back in a second. Apologies.
Councillor Miskell. It's your turn.
Apologies. So, Councillor Rees, my fault.
No, I was just letting you know that Councillor Smith had finished speaking.
You know,
no, I know it's warm. I know we've extended the guillotine.
It's hard to keep your interest in some members' contributions, but yes, Councillor Rees. Yeah.
Councillor Miskell. What are you saying? Well, I've got no further comment. I've got one more comment. Sorry. Sorry, I have got one more comment, and it's about the creative industry sector. The narrative does say growth in the cultural and creative industries. That is a 1-year increase, whereas the figure for 2024, 9.42 thousand, is indeed an increase on 2023, but it is a decrease on 2022, 2021, 2020. Understandable. There is an increase, but it's lower than in 2019 and 2018. I will posit that the only reason why it's higher in 2024 compared to 2023 is 2023 was the year after both the invasion of Ukraine and the increase in gas prices, but also Liz Truss. So I would like to just question the narrative around that, and I would like to see further data going forward, because I think having a 1-year bump feels like an anomaly rather than a trend.
Thank you, and I'll just go to Councillor Smith, and we'll just go for any final reflections before we take the recommendations. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and I do find it funny that you struggle to keep your attention when I'm speaking, as we do share the same ward, of course.
But
so
certainly
I thought
not the same views, Councillor Smith.
It was just a quick point on whether, for the core cities data, it always includes the population kind of adjustment, or whether sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think sometimes, I'm not sure if it's core cities or centre for cities, but sometimes they use built-up area ONS statistics, and sometimes they use combined urban areas, which brings parts of Rotherham into Sheffield as well, effectively in terms of the urban area. So it's probably important that when we are mentioning sort of definitions of city geography in the statistics, we just make sure we source where that definition of the city is, because depending on whether they're on the source, they have different definitions of the urban area. Effectively, the thing is, quite often people refer to Manchester, and actually the statistics actually refer to Greater Manchester, which is another one. So we will be careful about making sure that we're sourcing what we mean.
Absolutely, and as we know, Manchester is a much smaller city than Sheffield in terms of population. We shouldn't let them forget this.
Very stark, isn't it, the difference?
Any final reflections at Sam or Justin? No. Well, thank you very much for bringing that paper, Sam. I know that you've done an awful lot of work to pull it together, so thank you and welcome to the organisation. Colleagues, the recommendations for approval, if you're minded, are on page 77. Can I ask colleagues whether you are agreed with the recommendations, and if you'd like to dissent, then please do raise your hand. I can see some people are nodding, in fact, yes. We're nodding in agreement, absolutely, so that therefore has been carried, thank you. That therefore takes us to item 11, which is an opportunity to receive the 2025 to 26 final report outturns for quarter 4. Now, Jane, who has been sitting, apologies, very patiently in the back of the room, for us to get to this item, is going to take us through it. Just for the overview of committee members, it's a standing item that comes to our committee for awareness and talks about the broader corporate position. So I am minded to suggest that whilst members are entitled to ask any questions that they may well have, I'd encourage you simply to ask questions that related to our committee area, and perhaps to pass any wider questions about the corporate position that the council faces to your relative representatives on S&R. But Jane, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So the starting point is, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and today I'll just give you a quick overview of the financial position for 25-26. So we finished the year with 11.1 million overspend, which is less than 2% of the council's net revenue budget. So it is still a significant pressure, but an improvement when we compared it to earlier in the year and the last 2 years. So it was 18.9 million when I came at quarter 3 and 34.7 million overspent last year. So we are moving in the right direction. The improvement is a result of strong action across the council, closer control of spending and better tracking of the position, particularly in the final part of the year. However, it is important to be clear that it doesn't mean the problem's gone away, and the same areas are still under pressure, particularly social care, children's social care, SEND and housing, where demand is higher and costs are greater than our budget allows. So the 11.1 million overspend will be funded from reserves, and that has helped us manage the position this year, but it's not something that we can continue to rely on, and it's a key reason why we need to keep a strong focus on financial discipline. In terms of what's driving that position, adult social care remains the biggest pressure at 30 million overspend due to a number of people needing care and the cost of that care. Children's services continues to face pressure, particularly from high cost placements and support for children with complex needs. And SEND transport has improved significantly during the year, with the overspend reducing as a result of practical changes such as shared transport, travel training and better decision making. So the committee's budgets, the committee finished the year with a 1.8 million underspend. So 1.1 million of that materialised during the final quarter of the year. So this is a positive position, and it's largely due to a combination of one-off funding, careful management of vacancies across the service, and lower than anticipated match funding requirements on externally funded programmes. There was also some additional income generated through economic growth activities and some slippage in planned expenditure. A significant proportion of the committee's activity is externally funded, particularly within employment skills and community learning programmes, which continues to help support service delivery. So overall, the committee has managed its budgets well during the year and delivered a strong financial position, whilst continuing to support economic growth, skills and development and cultural activity across the city. So to summarise, the final position is better than expected and better than previous years, and that improvement is due to strong action during the year and some funding that we'd set aside at the beginning of the year that was released. But the underlying pressures remain, particularly in social care, SEND and housing. We've used reserves to manage that position this year. That's not sustainable, and going forward the focus has to be on reducing demand, improving value for money, delivering the changes set out in the Future Sheffield programme, which is key to creating a more sustainable financial position. So I'm happy to take any questions that members might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I'll just go to Councillor Moynihan. Councillor Moynihan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. First of all, reducing demand. That's not going to happen in in adult social care. The demand is going to grow, so it's probably about doing things differently. It has to be. But the other thing that worries me is, and I've asked this previously to you, Jane, is the non-filling of vacancies, vacancy monitoring. And I do get concerned about the effects on staff well-being, mental health, stress, etc., of those people who are struggling to deliver the service. So it's probably might be one for Kate rather than you, Jane, about how we're managing that. And also, it ultimately does have to have an effect on service delivery, particularly around quality. I know we've experienced something recently around marketing, communications, Ben, you know, where there are vacancies and where we can't get the level of service that we would like. So I just wonder if you could respond to that briefly. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll just ask Kate Martin, who is our Exec Director, for any reflections.
Yeah, I'll just provide just a short answer and happy to have a discussion outside of this. So we have a current programme that colleagues and the public may be aware of, including the Future Sheffield programme. We have a programme of work as part of that under the City Future and the Growth Work Stream. That is to look exactly at the resources that we need to deliver that longer term 10-year plan, which includes the different delivery resources for each of the teams that we need, including the area that we're talking about here. We will have a proposition round about the autumn time in terms of the types of resources that we need. Talent retention is really important for the council as well, including also investing and growing in our own talent through our own workforce as well. So that piece of work will shape the resources, as I said, that we need to deliver or to work with partners to really focus, in particular, the next, say, 5 years of the growth plan, and that will help with some of the vacancy and some of the restraint that we've had to implement, over the last financial year in particular, and that will give us, as I said, 3 to 5 years probably of a new way of delivering and more and better aligned resourcing It's a fair point, and I'd be happy to discuss with any of the committee the detail around that programme, should that help. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for adding clarity on that issue, which I know many of us are concerned about. I don't see any other colleague indicating, so therefore we'll go to the proposals in Jane's paper, which I think are on page number. In fact, the report's on page 115 to 138, and the proposals or the recommendations are on page 116. Colleagues, can I ask whether we are happy to approve that, whether we're all agreed? Please do raise your hand in dissent if you wish to dissent. I think we're all in agreement. I see no one raising their hands to dissent, so that item therefore is carried. Jane, thank you very much for bringing that today. So, colleagues, with that brings us to the formal end of our meeting, our first meeting of this committee that we concluded in 2 hours and 38 minutes. So thank you very much, colleagues. Hope you have a lovely day.